Chapter 144. Yin Xiangzi was killed by Chu Xiu's saber, and the rest of the warriors in the inner strong realm couldn't escape even if they wanted to. After everyone was killed, Chu Yuanxing walked over and bowed to Chu Xiu. With a grateful expression, he said, "Thank you for saving me, brother. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to return to Guangzhou." From the previous conversation, Chu Yuanxing also knew that the person in front of him didn't owe his Chu clan a favor. He only helped because he admired his father, so now he owed him a favor. Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Hero Chu, you don't have to be so polite. In this life, the person I admire the most is a person like your father. He can persist in his own thoughts. Even if there are millions of people, he will still go forward. If there were more people like Hero Chu in Jianghu, the current Jianghu wouldn't be so chaotic. Also, Great Hero Chu, I also admire you. Great Hero Chu has inherited your father's legacy. You are a chivalrous and righteous man. You have benefited Jianghu, and you have never considered your own interests. I admire you for this." Hearing Chu Xiu say this, Chu Yuanxing was also happy. There were many people in Jianghu who praised his father. Even if they met him, they would praise his father, so Chu Yuanxing was already used to it. But there weren't many people who praised him. Even if there were, most of them were people who flattered him. Chu Yuanxing was just a mediocre and indecisive person, but that didn't mean he was really stupid. He could see clearly who was sucking up to him. The strength of the person in front of him was so strong, and he was definitely one of the best among his peers. He even saved him just now. What was the use of such an existence to flatter him? In fact, the first half of what Chu Xiu said was true. He really admired people like Chu Kuanga. What he admired was not Chu Kuanga's chivalrous actions, but the spirit in his heart. As long as it was something he wanted to do, no matter what the road ahead was, no matter how many difficulties and obstacles there were, he could still maintain the spirit of thousands of people. Such a person could be called a hero of a generation. However, although Chu Xiu admired such a person, he would not become such a person, because such people usually did not live to the end. When facing 10 million people, Chu Xiu also had the courage to attack. However, at that time, he would either have the confidence to deal with 10 million people, or Chu Xiu would use all means to kill the 10 million people until there were only 1,000,000 or 100,000 people left. To put it simply, Chu Xiu wouldn't act recklessly if he wasn't confident. Chu Yuanxing cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu and said, "Anyway, it's all thanks to brother that I survived this disaster. May I know brother's name, and which sect do you come from?" Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Well, I am Chu Xiu. As for my background, I don't want to talk about it. Hero Chu is a good person, but I am not a good person. My background is really a bit difficult to talk about." Chu Yuanxing said softly, "Your surname is also Chu, it's really fate. But why can't I talk about my background? Brother Chu, are you from the demonic path? It doesn't matter, although most of the people who want to kill me are from the demonic path, I actually don't have any prejudice against demonic path people. In the past, my father once said that the people in this world can't be simply summarized as righteous and demonic. In the righteous path, there are many hypocrites and ambitious people, and in the demonic path, there are also those who were forced to join the demonic path, as well as those who are free and easy in the pugilistic world." Chu Xiu sighed and said, "People in the pugilistic world have no choice. I come from a small family, but because of a family incident, I was forced to wander the pugilistic world. I had no choice but to join the Blue Dragon Society and become an assassin. My hands are already stained with the blood of innocent people, so naturally, I can't be considered a good person." Chu Yuanxing was puzzled and said, "Chu Xiu? Why does this name sound so familiar?" At first, when he heard Chu Xiu's name, Chu Yuanxing didn't feel anything. Later, when he heard Chu Xiu say that he used to be an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society, Chu Yuanxing felt that the name was familiar. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Great Hero Chu should have seen my name on the Tiger and Dragon list." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Chu Yuanxing suddenly realized and said, "The 18th place on the Tiger and Dragon list, Chu Xiu. No wonder Brother Chu is so strong, so it turns out that you are a young hero on the Tiger and Dragon list." Chu Yuanxing was also on the Tiger and Dragon list, but with his current age he had long been removed from the list. Therefore, he didn't pay much attention to the tiger and dragon list. In particular, Chu Xiu had made a name for himself in the Northern Yan Kingdom, so the people who were familiar with him were mostly in the Northern Yan Kingdom. Chu Yuanxing also occasionally heard others talking about the changes in the rankings of some of the young talents on the Longhu list, so he had some impression of him. Then Chu Yuanxing patted Chu Xiu's shoulder and said, "Brother Chu doesn't need to worry about it. Being an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society isn't something that can't be said. Who knows about the grudges of the people in the world? Buddhists always say that one can become a Buddha after laying down the butcher's knife, right? By the way, Brother Chu, did you come here because of the Blue Dragon Society's mission? But since you are from the Northern Yen, you should belong to the Northern Yen branch. Why are you here?" Chu Yuanxing didn't really care about Chu Xiu's identity. This was because his father had instilled some ideas in him. Whether it was good or evil, whether it was right or wrong, whether it was good or evil, whether it was right or wrong, it wasn't determined by one's birth. Chu Yuanxing didn't understand this as deeply as his father. He only knew that the person in front of him was his savior, and he admired his father and his character. Naturally, Chu Yuanxing wanted to side with Chu Xiu. In any case, even Chu Kuanga's good friend from back in the day was from the path of devils. Therefore, he had already prepared himself for the possibility that Chu Xiu was a villain from the path of devils. But it turned out that Chu Xiu was just an assassin from the Azure Dragon Society. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No, I have already betrayed the Blue Dragon Society. I came from the Heavenly Sin branch, and the branch leader was too selfish. He wanted to use me to steal the treasure, so I could only choose to betray the Blue Dragon Society. And because of the treasure, I was chased by a few big sects in the Northern Yen. I can't live in the Northern Yen anymore, so I can only prepare to go elsewhere. The Guanzhong area is in the center of the Three Kingdoms, and the martial path is flourishing. There is also the Guanzhong torture room, so it is orderly and orderly. Also, it doesn't have the pressure of those big sections. This time I want to go there." When Chu Yuanxing heard this, his eyes lit up. He was just thinking about how to return the favor to Chu Xiu, and now the opportunity was here. Chu Yuanxing said directly, "Brother Chu, since you have betrayed the Blue Dragon Society, then don't go back. Stay in the Guanzhong area. You are my savior. It is hard to say in other places, but in the Guanzhong area, it is very easy to arrange. If you don't mind, I can recommend you to enter the Guanzhong torture room." Chu Xiu's eyes slightly narrowed. This Chu Yuanxing was more generous than he thought. He didn't even get to say some things, but the other party directly said everything for him. It had to be said that Chu Yuanxing was quite good in some aspects. However, on the surface, Chu Xiu still put on a slightly hesitant expression and said, "But my identity is, after all, sensitive. Is it really appropriate to enter the Guanzhong torture room?" Chu Yuanxing casually waved his hand and said, "If the Guanzhong torture room doesn't reveal your background, then the identity of a Blue Dragon Society member is nothing. How about this, Brother Chu? Your surname is also Chu, so you don't have to call me Hero Chu. You can just call me Big Brother, and I will tell others that you are my distant cousin. If my cousin, Chu Yuanxing, wants to enter the Guanzhong torture room, not to mention that you are only from the Blue Dragon Society, even if you are from the Kunlun Devil Cult, it won't be a problem." Upon hearing this, Chu Xiu directly cupped his hands at Chu Yuanxing and said, "Thank you, Big Brother." Chu Yuanxing waved his hand and said, "Brother, you don't have to be so polite. Today you saved me. Recommending you to enter the Guanzhong torture room is just a small matter." For Chu Yuanxing, this was really a small matter, because he knew that the entire Guanzhong torture room, including the current hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Siyu, owed his father. Of course, they had to repay this favor, and they had to repay it for the rest of their lives. Recommending talents to the Guanzhong torture room was not the first time that Chu Yuanxing had done this kind of thing. However, in the past, he only recommended some ordinary constables in the pugilistic world. As long as they had some ability, Chu Yuanxing didn't mind doing them a favor at little cost. But now, Chu Xiu was his savior. Not only did he have to recommend Chu Xiu to the Guanzhong torture room, but he also had to get a good position for Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu looked at the sky and said, "In this case, let's hurry back to Guanzhong now. This is the border between Guanzhong and Eastern Qi. Although it is very close to Guanzhong, it is still a bit dangerous." Chu Yuanxing looked at the corpses of his 2 guards on the ground and couldn't help but reveal a trace of sadness in his eyes. He said to Chu Xiu, "Brother, bring their corpses back as well. They grew up with me. Although they are called guards, they are actually like my brothers. In the end, because they protected me, they both died here." Chu Xiu pretended to comfort him and said, "Big brother, please restrain your grief. The dead can't come back to life." Chu Yuanxing nodded. He also knew that the crisis was not over yet. It was not the time to be sad, so he immediately followed Chu Xiu to Guanzhong with the bodies. The scenery of Guanzhong was completely different from that of northern Yan or eastern Qi. There were no big cities in Guanzhong. Instead, there were small cities everywhere. Several or even more than 10 small cities could form a large state capital. There was a reason for this. In the past, Guanzhong was located between 3 countries. Although it was very large, it was a place of war. Some large cities could not be built at all. It was possible that as soon as one side was built, the other side would fight and the city would be destroyed. Now the entire Guanzhong was roughly divided into 4 areas: Guanzhong, Guannan, Guanxi, and Guanbei. Guanzhong City in the center was the largest city in Guanzhong. The Guanzhong torture room was also located here. Chapter 145. Guanzhong City was located in the center of the entire Guanzhong land. It was black on the outside and could be said to be the strangest city in the world. It was an iron city. In the past, the Guanzhong area was filled with the flames of war. The people of the Guanzhong martial arts world built the Guanzhong torture room to establish order. Therefore, they prepared to build a city that would not fall in front of the armies of the 3 countries. They wrapped the city walls with black iron, making it extremely strong. Even a martial arts grandmaster who could break rivers and shatter mountains would not be able to destroy such a city of iron. The entire Guanzhong torture room took 100 years to complete the construction of Guanzhong City. Its scale was comparable to the capital cities of large countries like Northern Yan, Eastern Qi, and Western Chu. As soon as he stepped into Guanzhong City, Chu Xiu felt that the warriors in Guanzhong gave him a different feeling. The warriors here gave people a more confident feeling. Even the warriors at the bottom were full of fighting spirit and vitality. In the northern Yan kingdom, most of the low-level warriors could only be regarded as ordinary Jianghu people. For the sake of some money or cultivation resources, everyone would cling to the rich and powerful and kill each other. Between warriors, there was a strong hostility and slyness. But because of historical reasons, there were no deep-rooted sects that had been passed down for more than 1,000 years in Guanzhong. Even the current big sects and families in Guanzhong were ordinary warriors at the bottom hundreds of years ago. Coupled with the restrictions of the Guanzhong torture room, the oppression the warriors at the bottom here did not suffer too much. Guanzhong was located in the center of the trade between the 3 countries. It was unusually prosperous and there were many opportunities. Simply put, in Guanzhong, as long as you had the ability, you did not have to worry about being buried. Because of Chu Kuangge's last words, Chu Yuanxing's residence was not in the Guanzhong torture room, but in a large mansion in Guanzhong City. Although Chu Yuanxing's way of doing things was somewhat similar to his father's, he wasn't completely devoid of his own thoughts. For example, Chu Kuangge used to be extremely thrifty and only lived in the Guanzhong torture room. He did not even have a house of his own and did not like any luxurious worldly possessions. But Chu Yuanxing was different. He liked luxury and enjoyment. What he liked most was to show off, such as calligraphy and paintings. As a martial artist, Chu Yuanxing's martial arts were not the strongest among his peers, but his calligraphy and painting skills were few and far between. At that moment, Chu Yuanxing had been chased all the way. It could be said that he was in a very sorry state. He first returned to his own courtyard and changed into a set of embroidered robes. Then he brought Chu Xiu to the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall. The Guanzhong torture room was located in the center of Guanzhong City. A large area of courtyards and high-rise buildings were grouped together, separated by walls. But both the courtyards and the walls were like the city walls of Guangzhou City, reinforced and cast with black iron, giving it a solemn feeling. There was no lion in front of the Guangzhou torture room. Instead, there was a long sword and a long saber as tall as a person. It symbolized the Guangzhou torture room's purpose all along, to stop wars with martial arts, and to establish order in the torture chamber. Even the signboard of the Guangzhou torture hall was not a wooden signboard, but a black iron signboard, carved with all kinds of weapons. It was said that these 4 words were carved with weapons by all the people who joined forces to build the Guangzhou torture room in the past. An extremely sharp aura rushed out. Most of the people who came to the Guangzhou torture room were the Jianghu constables that belonged to the Guangzhou torture room. The Jianghu constables were dressed very differently. They wore ordinary warrior clothes, but according to their levels, they were divided into cyan, gray, and black. Generally, body tempering and blood condensation realm practitioners wore cyan, innate and inner invulnerability realm practitioners wore gray, and those in black were usually the rulers of the Guangzhou torture room. The weakest of them was at least in the physical invulnerability realm. There were also some modifications to their warrior clothes. Their shoulders, forearms, and chests were all covered with refined black iron armor with Taotai patterns. While it didn't affect their movements, it could also increase their defensive power. This was also because most of the Jianghu constables acted alone to catch criminals who had broken the law in Guangzhou. Therefore, the Guangzhou torture room tried its best to increase their combat power. Other than that, most of the Jianghu constables in the Guangzhou torture room carried a huge iron box that was half the height of a person on their back. Inside the box were some spare weapons and some hidden weapons, as well as tools used in solving cases. The Jianghu constables who came from the Guangzhou torture room were very capable. They could hunt down criminals and thieves for thousands of miles on their own. When dealing with cases of revenge in the Jianghu, they could easily deduce detailed information about the murderer. Therefore, whether it was in the 3 kingdoms or some of the big sects in the Jianghu, they would usually look for the Jianghu constables from the Guangzhou torture room to deal with such matters. Of course, this wasn't voluntary work. It required money. Chu Yuanxing led Chu Xiu all the way into the Guangzhou torture room. The Jianghu constables who passed by all bowed respectfully to Chu Yuanxing and shouted, "Master Chu." Chu Xiu could see that at least 90% of the Jianghu constables' respect was sincere. It could be seen that Chu Yuanxing's status in the Guangzhou torture room was high. Of course, from this point of view, it was very important to have a good father. For Chu Yuanxing, Chu Kuanga's legacy was enough for him to enjoy for a lifetime. If Guan Xiu could live long, it wouldn't be a problem for his son to enjoy it for a lifetime. They walked all the way to the backyard of the Guangzhou torture room, where Guan Xiu had been living. Like Chu Kuanga, Guan Xiu didn't like luxury and didn't have a house outside. Chu Yuanxing was just about to knock on the door when the door of the house was suddenly opened. A woman walked out. Even Chu Xiu was a little stunned when he saw that woman's appearance. He felt like he was dazzled. The woman's appearance was extremely beautiful. She had black eyebrows and red lips. Her facial features could only be described as perfect. She looked to be in her 30s, but she didn't look old at all. Instead, it added a bit of a mature charm. Her fiery red wide gauze dress couldn't hide her seductive figure, which was as tempting as a ripe peach. In fact, the most attractive thing about this woman wasn't her appearance or figure, but her temperament. It was an extremely awkward feeling. Her temperament was cold and elegant, but when combined with her appearance and figure, she gave off an extremely charming and seductive feeling. The more serious her expression was, the colder her temperament was, but the more seductive she gave off the illusion that she was. Chu Xiu could be considered to have seen the world in his previous life. Whether it was in real life or on TV, none of them could be compared to the woman in front of him. What they lacked wasn't in appearance, but in temperament that was a mixture of coldness and charm. Simply put, this woman was the kind of woman who would make people think of bed at first sight. At this moment, when Chu Yuanxing saw this woman, he actually became a little nervous. He bowed to the woman and said, "Sister-in-law." Chu Xiu looked at Chu Yuanxing in surprise. In this Guangzhou torture room, Chu Yuanxing had never been so polite to anyone. On the contrary, others would take the initiative to greet him even if they were stronger than him. The woman nodded lightly and said indifferently, "Are you here to look for Master? Master is handling official business inside. You can go in." With that, the woman left directly. She only glanced at Chu Xiu and didn't say anything. After the woman left, Chu Xiu asked in confusion, "This is?" Chu Yuanxing whispered, "This is Guan Xiu, Brother Guan's wife, Mei Qinglian." Chu Yuanxing just wanted to say something, but he held it back again. He just said softly, "Anyway, she is Brother Guan's wife. It's always right to be respectful to her." Hearing Chu Yuanxing said so, Chu Xiu's expression was slightly weird. If he didn't count it wrong, the current Guanzhong torture room's hall master, the Iron Mask Judge Guan Xiu, should be in his 70s. Of course, Guan Xiu was a martial arts master of the real pellet state. His lifespan was as long as 300 years. He was actually in his prime. However, Guan Xiu was rumored to be upright, impartial, and strict. In the end, he married such a wife, which made Chu Xiu feel a little strange. Chu Yuanxing didn't say much. He just took Chu Xiu into the house and knocked on the door of a study room. "Come in." A low and dignified voice came from the study room. Chu Yuanxing pushed the door and entered. The study room was full of all kinds of official documents, which seemed a little messy. A middle-aged man who looked about 40 or 50 years old was sitting in the center. This person was the famous Guanzhong torture room hallmaster, the Iron Mask Judge Guan Xiu, who was ranked 8th on the martial arts master list. The martial arts master list was not only ranked according to strength, but also based on one's reputation in the martial arts world. The wind-sweeping tower didn't count. Only the recognized reputation of the martial arts world counted. Guan Xiu's strength was actually not as powerful as other powerhouses on the martial arts master list. For example, his ranking on the martial arts master list was even higher than the great dragon head of the Blue Dragon Society, Bu Tianan, but in fact, his strength was far inferior to Bu Tianan. However, the Guanzhong torture room completely rose in his hands. With its current status in the martial arts world, it could be said to be a big shot who stirred up the martial arts world. Therefore, even if his strength was not comparable to Bu Tiannan's, his ranking was still above Bu Tiannan's. At this time, Chu Xiu was also sizing up Guan Xiu. This person was tall and wore an ordinary black robe. He had a square face and a dignified expression. He had 3 long strands of beard and a slightly red face. At this time, because there were no outsiders in the study room, Guan Xiu restrained his aura. He looked like an ordinary person, but Chu Xiu could still feel an extremely strong pressure from him. Part of it was because he was a martial Dao Grand Master powerhouse, and there was also the majestic aura that he had accumulated after being in charge of the Guanzhong Punishment Hall for decades. Even if he tried to restrain it, he could not restrain it much. Chapter 146. Chu Yuanxing led Chu Xiu into the study and cupped his hands at Guan Xiu. "Brother Guan." Although Guan Xiu was 30 years older than Chu Yuanxing, he had been Chu Kuang's subordinate in the past. He had only achieved what he had because of Chu Kuang's promotion. Therefore, Guan Xiu had always treated Chu Yuanxing as an equal. Guan Xiu was very serious in front of others, but when he saw Chu Yuanxing come in, he smiled and said, "Weren't you invited to the Shangyang Mo family in Eastern Qi to attend the Mo family's patriarch's 300th birthday? Why are you back so soon?" Chu Yuanxing had a sad look on his face. "Don't mention it. I almost couldn't make it back. I was ambushed by the 7 murder ghosts' disciple, Yingxiangzi, and his men. Si and the others died protecting me. If it weren't for Brother Chu's help, I'm afraid I wouldn't have made it back." With that, Chu Yuanxing pulled Chu Xiu to his side and introduced him to Guan Xiu. "Greetings, Hall Master Guan." Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Guan Xiu respectfully. Guan Xiu nodded at Chu Xiu. Then he said gloomily, "Don't worry. The Guanzhong torture room will demand an explanation from those people." Chu Yuanxing quickly said, "There's no need. Yingxiangzi has been killed by Brother Chu. My revenge has been avenged." Guan Xiu looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Then, he said lightly, "Although Yingxiangzi is dead, your revenge has not been avenged." Chu Yuanxing was puzzled. Yingxiangzi had been killed by Chu Xiu. Why hadn't his revenge been avenged? Guan Xiu suddenly turned to look at Chu Xiu and said, "What do you think?" Chu Xiu smiled. He knew that Guan Xiu should have noticed something. This should be a test. Guan Xiu had been in charge of the Guanzhong torture room for many years. He was impartial, but he wasn't an idiot who didn't understand the ways of the world. In the past, Chu Yuanxing only needed to inform his subordinates to place people in the Guanzhong torture room. The other people in the Guanzhong torture room would naturally do it. But now, Chu Yuanxing had brought Chu Xiu to see him and mentioned that Chu Xiu had saved his life. Clearly, he was going to use the method of arranging Chu Xiu into the punishment hall to thank him for his kindness. Moreover, this position could not be too low. Otherwise, Chu Yuanxing would lose face. However, no matter how great Chu Yuanxing's reputation was, Guan Xiu had to see the quality of the person in front of him. If the person in front of him was an idiot, even with Chu Yuanxing's recommendation, Guan Xiu would not arrange for him to be in an important position. Chu Xiu said to Chu Yuanxing, who was beside him, in a deep voice, "Big brother, think about it carefully. Yin Xiangzi's master, the Seven Kills Ghost, is just an itinerant warrior. His master is dead, and he is just a stray dog. How could he have the strength to gather so many people to kill you? Furthermore, big brother, your identity is special. Aren't Yin Xiangzi and the others afraid of the Guanzhong torture room's revenge after they touch you? There's only one reason why they dare to do this and have the confidence to do so. It's because they have a backer behind them. Or it can be said that they are just a pawn. The person who really wants to kill you has never shown himself." Chu Yuanxing was dumbfounded after hearing this. Obviously, he didn't expect Chu Xiu to analyze such a simple matter and make so much sense of it. "Then who wants to kill me?" After Chu Yuanxing asked this question, he seemed to think of something. He said with a depressed expression, "Pretend I didn't ask." He also recalled the enemies his father had provoked in the past. There were countless of them. There were people from the righteous path and demonic path. It could be said that there were many people in the world who wanted him dead. How could he find out? To wear the crown, one had to bear its weight. Chu Yuanxing also knew this principle. Since he had inherited all his father's connections and reputation, he naturally had to inherit these grudges. Guan Xiu, who was on the other side, glanced at Chu Xiu and nodded slightly. His reaction was fast, and his mind was still clear. This was enough. He was afraid that Chu Yuanxing would recommend some boorish men who only had strength. If that was the case, it would be difficult for him. Although strength was important in the Guanzhong torture room, ability was more important. A brainless boorish man could not become a person with real power in the Guanzhong torture room. If Chu Xiu was such a person, he could only temporarily disregard Chu Yuanxing's face and send him to some places without real power. Guan Xiu said to Chu Yuanxing in a deep voice, "You don't have to worry about this matter anymore. Since the other party dared to attack you, he is provoking the Guanzhong torture room. I will send someone to investigate this matter." Chu Yuanxing nodded and said, "All right, I will have to trouble you with this matter, Brother Guan. There is one more thing. This Brother Chu saved my life. Coincidentally, he is now wandering the underworld, so I would like to recommend him to the Guanzhong torture room. Brother Guan, Brother Chu's strength is not weak. There are few martial artists of the same level who can match him. Yin Xiangzi and the other two physical invulnerability experts were easily killed by him." Guan Xiu nodded casually. He knew about Chu Yuanxing's talent in martial arts. In the past, Chu Kuanga was an outstanding person, whether it was in terms of strength or character. It was a pity that Chu Yuanxing did not inherit this trait of Chu Kuanga. His attainments in martial arts could only be said to be mediocre. With his eyesight, he could tell who was a rare opponent of the same level. Anyway, he was definitely stronger than him. Seeing that Guan Xiu did not believe him, Chu Yuanxing quickly said, "Brother Guan, you don't believe in my eyesight, but do you not believe in wind-sweeping buildings' eyesight? This brother of mine is ranked 18th on the wind-sweeping buildings Longhu leaderboard. He is definitely a young talent. The only thing is that his background is not too good. In his early years he was threatened to join the Blue Dragon Society, but he has already betrayed them. However, to the Guanzhong torture room, his background in the Blue Dragon Society is nothing. Moreover, I am prepared to recognize him as a distant relative. To the public, I will say that he is my cousin. This way, no one can say anything." Upon hearing Chu Yuanxing say this, Guan Xiu was really a little surprised. At his level, he did not care about the Longhu leaderboard, which only the younger generation would pay attention to. However, he knew the weight of the Longhu leaderboard. To be able to enter the Longhu leaderboard, one must either be strong or have a good background. Without a doubt, Chu Xiu was the former. There were many martial artists from the Guanzhong torture room who had entered the Longhu leaderboard. For example, he and Chu Yuanxing had been on the Longhu leaderboard before. If Chu Xiu did not rely on his background to enter the leaderboard, then he could only rely on his strength. A ranking on the Longhu leaderboard and a recommendation from Chu Yuanxing were enough to exchange for an important position in the Guanzhong torture room. Guan Xiu pondered for a while, then looked at Chu Xiu and said, "You were recommended by Yuan Sheng. Naturally, I will not let you start as a low-level constable. How about this? The West Yen penal officer, Wei Juduan, still lacks a patrol. Although your strength is a little lacking, you can reluctantly take up the post. Are you satisfied?" Chu Xiu was still a little vague about the division of power within the Guanzhong torture room. In the original plot, he only had a general understanding of the Guanzhong area. The details were a little vague, so he did not know what the position of the patrol was. However, he believed that with Chu Yuanxing's recommendation, this position would definitely not be bad. Therefore, Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "If Hall Master Guan thinks that I am qualified, then I naturally do not dare to be picky." Guan Xiu nodded and shouted outside, "Yuqi, come in for a while." After a while, a young man in his 30s with a gentle temperament walked in. He cupped his hands and said to Guan Xiu and Chu Yuanxing, "Master, Hero Chu." Guan Xiu pointed at Chu Xiu and said, "This is Chu Xiu. He was recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing. It just so happens that Wei Juduan lacks a patrol, so I am going to let him take up the position. Take him to rest first and tell him the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Tomorrow, take my warrant and take Chu Xiu to Guanxi to take up the post." Yuqi's face revealed a look of surprise. Obviously, he did not expect that a person who had just joined the Guanzhong torture room would be given the position of patrol. However, he quickly controlled his emotions and turned to Chu Xiu with a smile. "Brother Chu, then come with me." Chu Xiu nodded and directly followed Yuqi out of the study. After the two of them left, Chu Yuanxing said to Guan Xiu with some pride, "Brother Guan, what do you think of the person I recommended? In recent years, the Guanzhong torture room has not produced many young talents. Now, I directly pulled one over for you, and he is even in the top 20 of the Longhu list." Guan Xiu shook her head and said, "You are still too gullible. How do you know that Chu Xiu is absolutely reliable? You actually want to recognize him as a member of the Chu family." Chu Yuanxing said in surprise, "Are you saying that there is a problem with Brother Chu? You did not see the situation back then. If Brother Chu did not make a move, I would have definitely died in the hands of Yin Xiangzi. Moreover, it is not a big deal to recognize him as a distant relative of the Chu family. Everyone in the pugilistic world knows that my father was born in a farmer's family. Our Chu family has never been a big family, so what if we have a distant relative?" Guan Xiu said indifferently, "You still don't understand. Aristocratic families dominate the pugilistic world because of their foundation. Lord Chu Kuanga is famous in the pugilistic world because of his reputation. Lord Chu Kuanga's legacy is all on you. Now that you have recognized him as a distant relative, it is equivalent to using Lord Chu Kuanga's reputation to protect him. This is something that many people want but cannot obtain. It can be said that you can repay him for saving your life with just this. In the end, you even recommended him to the torture chamber." Chu Yuanxing scratched his head and said, "Anyway, I have already recommended him. Moreover, Brother Chu's strength is not bad. It is also a good thing for the Guanzhong torture room." Guan Xiu shook her head and said, "You always think of things so simply. But it doesn't matter. The Guanzhong torture room can accept anyone in the world, but we are not afraid of people playing tricks in the dark. All right, you just came back, so don't go back today. I will get your sister-in-law to prepare some banquet to welcome you." Upon hearing this, Chu Yuanxing hurriedly said, "Forget it, I won't trouble sister-in-law. I still have some matters to deal with in the mansion." With that, Chu Yuanxing hurriedly bid farewell and left. Chapter 147. Inside the room, Guan Siyu and Chu Yuanxing's conversation was unknown to Chu Xiu. In any case, Guan Siyu had already given the order, so Chu Xiu's goal had been achieved. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Yuqi and asked, "May I know Brother Yuqi's name?" Yuqi was also a physical invulnerability realm martial artist, but Chu Xiu could feel that Yuqi's cultivation was much more profound than his. He might have already reached the peak of the physical invulnerability realm. Yuqi smiled and said, "Brother Chu, you can just call me Yuqi. I don't have a name, so I'm called Yuqi. I was originally an abandoned child. When I was young, my master picked me up and raised me. However, I found a wooden plate with the words Yuqi written on it, so this is both my surname and my name." Chu Xiu nodded. As a disciple raised by Guan Siyu, no matter what Yuqi's position in the Guanzhong disciplinary hall was, his status was definitely not low. Yuqi said as he walked, "I've heard about Brother Chu's story. You entered the Longhu list at such a young age. I believe that Brother Chu will definitely shine in the Guanzhong torture room in the future." Chu Xiu smiled bitterly and said, "A tall tree attracts the wind. Entering the Longhu list wasn't my intention. The disciples of large sects enter the list for the reputation of their sects and for their own reputation. But for independent cultivators like me to enter the list, other than attracting the wind and incurring grudges, there's basically no use. For example, when I entered the list, I pushed down by Wuji from the northern drifting snow city, who was originally ranked 18th. I'm sure that Bai Wuji will bear a grudge against me." Yuqi chuckled and said, "It's a blessing or a curse. When one travels the pugilistic world, one must either leave one's name or leave one's name. Who doesn't want to leave their name on the Longhu list? Moreover, if Brother Chu didn't have a ranking on the Longhu leaderboard, even with Hero Chu's recommendation, the position of patrol envoy would not have been yours." Chu Xiu asked, "By the way, Brother Yuqi, I've been in Northern Yen for a long time, so I don't know much about the structure of the Guanzhong torture room. What's my rank as an inspector?" Yuqi explained in detail. "If that's the case, I'll tell you about the Guanzhong torture room in detail. After all, you'll have to know about it in the future. The Guanzhong torture room has been established for hundreds of years. The structure is very clear now. Needless to say, the person in charge of the Guanzhong torture room was the torture hall master. However, the position of hall master was also very complicated. To become a hall master, there were 3 requirements. The first was the approval of the previous hall master, and the second was the approval of all the other martial artists in the disciplinary hall. As for the last requirement, it required the approval of Northern Yen, Eastern Qi, and Western Chu. The Guanzhong torture room is in existence between the pugilistic world and the imperial court. The 3 countries recognized the status of the Guanzhong torture room and even the law, but at the same time, the Guanzhong torture room had to return the favor. We promised not to participate in the disputes between the 3 countries and maintain absolute neutrality. Therefore, the hall master had to be someone that the 3 countries recognized as selfless and neutral. These 3 requirements were set by the Guanzhong torture room in the past few decades. You should know the history of the Guanzhong torture room. It was rather chaotic and there were no clear rules. It wasn't until my master led the rise of the Guanzhong torture room 30 years ago that the Guanzhong torture room achieved its current status. At this point, Yuqi's tone was somewhat proud. After all, in the hundreds of years of history of the Guanzhong torture room, even if the name of the founder had been forgotten, no one would forget the names of 2 people. One was Chu Kuanga, and the other was Guan Siyu. Of these 2 people, one laid the foundation and reputation for the Guanzhong torture room, while the other led the Guanzhong torture room to rise from the cracks between the 3 countries. Their role in the Guanzhong torture room was irreplaceable. Not to say that there would never be a successor, but at least it was unprecedented. Yuqi continued, "In addition to the hall master, there are 4 disciplinary officers in charge of the disciplinary hall: Guandong, Guannan, Guanxi, and Guanbei. In the future, the Guanxi disciplinary officer, nine-fingered soul-chasing Wei Judwan, will be your immediate superior. He's an expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm. Below the disciplinary officers are the patrols. As the name suggests, they are in charge of patrolling the various prefectures, and cities to see if there are any martial arts factions or lone practitioners breaking the law and breaking the rules of the Guangzhou area. Also, the patrols are in charge of hunting down criminals and robbers. Their management is more comprehensive, and their own power is not small. Generally speaking, the number of patrols under each disciplinary officer is not fixed. Some have 5, 6, 7, 8, and sometimes even more than 10. Patrols are the backbone of the Guangzhou torture room. There are people like Brother Chu who are recommended by the disciplinary hall headquarters, but most of them are cultivated by the various disciplinary officers, so the number is not certain. Normally, the strength of a patrol is mostly in the 3-flower gathering realm or the 5-chi condensation realm. It is very rare for someone like Brother Chu to become a patrol with the strength of the physical invulnerability realm. Only during the years when the Guangzhou torture room was at its weakest, so Brother Chu was able to obtain such a position not only because of Hero Chu's recommendation, but also because of your ranking on the Longhu leaderboard. And below the patrols are the Jianghu constables that the people of the Jianghu are familiar with. Among them, those in the body tempering and blood condensation realms are ordinary constables. Only those in the innate, internal invulnerability and physical invulnerability realms can be called Jianghu constables. Every Jianghu constables also have their own constables. Of course, there are some Jianghu constables who are more eccentric and don't like to lead so many new people, so they choose to work alone. Chu Xiu heard this and nodded. The position of a patrol was not low. No matter what, it was a person in charge of a region, and the power in his hands was not small. It was enough for Chu Xiu to use it to his fullest potential. Yuchi continued, "These are the basic structures of the Guangzhou torture room. In the disciplinary hall headquarters, there is a department called the disciplinary division, which is responsible for handling important matters. There are not many people, only a few hundred, and there are a few leaders among them. Their ranks are the same as the 4 disciplinary officers. There are no patrols under them, only ordinary secret agents, but there are different levels." Yuchi pointed to himself and said, "I am a 5th-grade secret agent of the disciplinary division." Hearing Yuchi's words, Chu Xiu immediately understood what kind of place the disciplinary division was. This was where the elites of the entire Guangzhou torture room were located, and the power was directly under the jurisdiction of the disciplinary hall master. "Thank you, Brother Yuchi, for telling me." Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Yuchi and said. Yuchi smiled and said, "You are welcome, Brother Chu. After all, you and I are colleagues now." As they spoke, Yuchi sent Chu Xiu back to his residence and let him rest for the night. Tomorrow, when he received Guan Siyu's warrant, he would go to Guanxi. Looking at Yuchi's departing back, Chu Xiu's expression was calm. The Guangzhou torture room was indeed full of talents. Yuchi looked ordinary, but in reality his strength was deeper than his. Moreover, he was a watertight person. He said what should be said, and he wouldn't say a word about what shouldn't be said. Along the way, Yuchi always had a smile on his face, but that smile didn't change at all. It was as if he was wearing a mask on his face, making it impossible to tell whether he was happy, angry, sad, or any other emotions. However, thinking about it, it was normal. After all, he was the disciple that Guan Siyu had raised since he was young, and she still kept him by her side. If Yuchi didn't have any ability, he probably wouldn't have stayed by Guan Siyu's side until now. At this moment, after Yuchi sent Chu Xiu off, he went straight to Guan Siyu's study. "I've sent him back. How do you feel?" Guan Siyu asked in a deep voice. Yuchi shook his head and said, "I can't tell. The other party is very cautious and didn't reveal anything wrong. However, I feel that this person is very shrewd." Guan Siyu said plainly, "Those who aren't shrewd won't live long in the Blue Dragon Society, and they won't be able to make it onto the Longhu list. My Guangzhou torture room isn't afraid of people with shrewd ambitions. We're only afraid that some people who want to destroy the foundation of the Guangzhou torture room will mix in. In the future, just pay attention to his actions. If there's nothing unusual, don't report to me. Yuchi hurriedly said, Yes, master. But soon after, Yuchi said with some hesitation, Master, the people of the outside world all say that you are fair and impartial, but this time, Great Hero Chu wants to do you a favor by making an exception and promoting a person who has just joined the torture chamber to be an inspector. This kind of action is somewhat inappropriate. He completely did not consider your reputation and thoughts. Guan Xiu suddenly looked up, and an incomparably powerful aura burst out. This small study suddenly seemed to set off a storm, making it hard for people to breathe. Yuchi knelt on the ground and hurriedly said, Master, I said all this for your own good. Guan Xiu said coldly, Of course I know you're doing this for my own good. Otherwise, do you think you can still stay by my side? I know what you mean, but you must remember that if it wasn't for Lord Chu Kuanga, I wouldn't have my current position, and there wouldn't be the glory of the Guanzhong torture room now. It's me and the Guanzhong torture room that owes Lord Chu Kuanga, not the other way around. Yuchi struggled under Guan Xiu's powerful aura and said, But you're the hall master of the Guanzhong torture room now. The glory of the Guanzhong torture room was also won by you. Chu Yuanxing isn't from the Guanzhong torture room at all, so what right does he have to speak in the Guanzhong torture room that's second only to you? Shut up. If you mention this kind of thing again in the future, then scram to hell and become a constable. Guan Xiu looked at Yuchi coldly, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. Everyone had their own selfish motives, and Yuchi was no exception. He was Guan Xiu's disciple, and Guan Xiu's interests were his interests. When he was born, Chu Kuanga was already dead, so he didn't receive any favors from Chu Kuanga. Instead, in his eyes, Chu Yuanxing was damaging Guan Xiu's interests and reputation by doing this. Today, Chu Yuanxing stuffed a person into the Guanzhong torture room, and tomorrow, another person. In the end, who did the Guanzhong torture room belong to? Chapter 148. Yuchi was considering Guan Xiu's reputation and interests. As Guan Xiu's personal disciple, Guan Xiu's interests were his interests. That was why he had said those words today. However, he hadn't expected Guan Xiu to be so sensitive about Chu Yuanxing's matters. His actions had angered his master. At that moment, the door to the study was pushed open, and a fragrant wind blew in. Mei Qinglian walked in and waved her hand. She looked at Yuchi and said, Did you make Master angry again? Really? As she spoke, Mei Qinglian walked behind Guan Xiu and squeezed his shoulder. All right, Master. Yuchi is still young after all. He didn't think before speaking. It's actually not a big deal. With Mei Qinglian's arrival, Guan Xiu's terrifying aura vanished, allowing Yuchi to heave a sigh of relief. Mei Qinglian said to Yuchi, Aren't you going to apologize to your master? Remember, master naturally has his reasons for doing things. Why is a young man like you meddling in? Yuchi immediately bowed to Guan Xiu and said, Master, this disciple was wrong. I won't dare to do it again. Guan Xiu waved her hand in annoyance and let Yuchi leave. Yuchi bowed to Mei Qinglian and said, Thank you, Master's wife. Yuchi's attitude toward Mei Qinglian was even a little fearful. This woman was also his master's wife, but he didn't even dare to look at her. After Yuchi left, Guan Xiu touched Mei Qinglian's hand behind her and sighed. He's too selfish. Even Yuchi, the disciple I personally raised, now has selfish thoughts. Mei Qinglian hugged Guan Xiu's neck and whispered in his ear, Everyone has desires. Master, you can't control them even if you want to. Yuchi is still too young and can't see that far. The Guanzhong torture room is flourishing in your hands. No matter how famous the descendants of the Chu family are, they can't be more famous than you, Master. Even if you give the position to Chu Yuanxing now, he won't dare to take it. Yuchi, you're worrying for nothing. Glancing at the pile of documents on the table, Mei Qinglian softly said, Let's deal with these tomorrow. This servant has stewed chicken soup. Master should rest early after eating. Guan Xiu patted Mei Qinglian's hand and said with a smile, Madam still cares about me. All right, I'll deal with it tomorrow. If others saw Guan Xiu's current appearance, they would surely be greatly shocked. This was because Guan Xiu usually gave people the impression that she was impartial, even to the point of being unreasonable. Most of the warriors in the Guanzhong torture room had never seen Guan Xiu smile. Moreover, Guan Xiu was also a person with extreme self-discipline. She had strict rules for her daily cultivation time and official business time. She could do more, but she couldn't do less. She casually pushed what needed to be done today to tomorrow. This was not something that Guan Xiu would do. The next morning, Yuqi arrived at Chu Xiu's residence early in the morning, preparing to follow Chu Xiu to Yanxi. At this moment, Yuqi's expression didn't change at all. He still wore a faint smile on his face, as if he wasn't the person who had been scolded by Guan Xiu to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat. The area of Guanzhong was very large, even larger than the northern Yan region of Yanxi. From Guanzhong to Guanxi, Chu Xiu and Yuqi walked for a full 7 days. The Guanxi torture chamber branch was in Jianghu City. It was also a small city, but it was also abnormally prosperous. Guanxi was close to West Chu, and Jianghu City was the center of Guanxi. Merchants from West Chu conducted business here. As soon as they entered the city, Chu Xiu could feel a bustling atmosphere. Yuqi said, "There are many merchants from West Chu in Guanxi, so there are many West Chu products that are extremely rare in the outside world. Brother Chu, you can come and take a look when you have time. Before I came, I already sent a message to Lord Wei Juduan, the Guanxi torture chamber branch. He should be waiting for you in the Guanxi torture chamber branch. Let's go directly to the torture chamber." Chu Xiu nodded and followed Yuqi to the Guanxi torture chamber branch. The Guanxi torture chamber branch was basically a smaller version of the Guanzhong torture room. However, the signboard was ordinary black iron with the words Guanxi torture chamber branch written on it. As soon as they entered the torture chamber, a few constables greeted them at the door. One of them said, "Lord Yuqi, Lord Wei is already waiting inside." Yuqi nodded and followed Chu Xiu into the meeting hall. There were 6 people in the meeting hall, and one of them was sitting in the main seat. He looked like a skinny old man dressed in black. His hair was already white, but he had an imposing aura about him. The old man's eyes were sharp, and he was playing with 2 iron balls carved with golden dragon patterns. The most eye-catching thing about him was that he only had 4 fingers on his right hand. This person was Chu Xiu's future boss, the Guanxi torture chamber's 9-finger soul chasing Wei Juduan. He was a great master in the unity of heaven and man realm, but he didn't give Chu Xiu the feeling that he was as strong as the heavenly sin branch leader. There were 5 people sitting below Wei Juduan. They were all inspectors under Wei Juduan's command. Some of them had reached the level of 3 flowers at one's prominence, while others had even stepped into the 5 Qis origin realm. At that moment, all 5 of them were also sizing up Chu Xiu. Yuqi cupped his hands at Wei Juduan and said, "Greetings, Master Wei." Wei Juduan smiled and said, "Yuqi, you don't have to be so polite. I have already received the news from the torture chamber headquarters." Although Wei Juduan's strength and status were much higher than Yuqi's, his attitude toward Yuqi was very kind. Everyone in the Guanzhong torture room knew that Yuqi was Guan Xiu's direct disciple, and he was the kind who was raised from a young age. Although the next head of the Guanzhong torture room didn't necessarily have to be the direct disciple of the previous head, Yuqi was definitely someone who the torture chamber focused on training. Coupled with his identity as Guan Xiu's direct disciple, Wei Juduan's attitude toward him was very polite. Yuqi pointed at Chu Xiu beside him and said, "This is Chu Xiu. He was assigned by my master to be an inspector under Master Wei. He was personally recommended by Master Chu Yuanqing, so he can be considered a distant relative of Master Chu. It just so happens that one of your inspectors has just died, so the torture chamber headquarters has added another one for you." Chu Xiu walked out and cupped his hands. "Greetings, Master Wei." At this moment, Wei Juduan and the others all turned to look at Chu Xiu, sizing him up. In the beginning, Wei Juduan didn't take this matter seriously. It was a good thing for him that the higher-ups were giving him more manpower. In the past few years, the strength of his Guanxi torture chamber branch had been getting weaker and weaker. There were only 5 inspectors left, and the strongest of the 4 torture chambers, the Guangdong torture chamber, had 16 inspectors. Wei Juduan couldn't even compare to a fraction of that number. But now that he saw that Chu Xiu was only in the physical invulnerability realm, Wei Juduan was a little dissatisfied. How many years had it been since someone in the physical invulnerability realm could become an inspector? Although his Guanxi torture chamber branch was weak, it wasn't a problem to find dozens of physical invulnerability realm martial artists. This way, he could have dozens of inspectors under him. But now that he heard Yuqi say that this Chu Xiu was recommended by Chu Yuanxing and could be considered a distant relative of the Chu family, Wei Juduan was relieved and didn't say anything more. He knew Chu Yuanxing's position in the Guanzhong torture room. Even he himself was a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. He had experienced the period when Chu Kuanga was in charge of the Guanzhong torture room. If Chu Yuanxing came looking for him directly and asked Chu Xiu to become an inspector under him, Wei Juduan might be in a difficult position. But since it was an order from the hall master, there was nothing more to say. So Wei Juduan directly said to Chu Xiu, "Not bad. The person recommended by Hero Chu is definitely not wrong. Go and sit at the side." Wei Juduan didn't say anything, but the other 5 inspectors didn't feel comfortable. The 5 of them were all veterans of the Guanzhong torture hall. They had started from the lowest level of Jianghu constables and were promoted to Jianghu constables. Finally, after accumulating merits and strength, they were able to become patrol envoys. But why did Chu Xiu become an inspector the moment he arrived? Most importantly, he was only in the physical invulnerability realm, the same as the constables under him. But now, he was on equal footing with them. In the Jianghu, it was common to judge one's strength based on strength. It was the same for Chu Xiu when he was in the Blue Dragon Society. Before he showed his strength, the people in the Blue Dragon Society weren't friendly. But the environment of the Guanzhong torture room was much more complicated than that of the Blue Dragon Society. In the Guanzhong torture room, not only did you have strength, but you also had to have experience. But now Chu Xiu had nothing. He entered through the back door. Of course, this made the others unhappy. Chu Xiu didn't care about these things. Instead, he was confused about what Yuqi said just now. Just now, Yuqi emphasized that he relied on Chu Yuanxing to enter the Guanzhong torture room. What did he mean? Was he afraid that the others didn't know that this was just a simple explanation, or was there some deeper meaning? But Yuqi's attitude was too well hidden. Chu Xiu couldn't see through his thoughts. Yuqi took out the warrant and handed it to Wei Juduan, saying, "Lord Wei, I've brought the leader and the people. I have to report back to the main hall." Wei Juduan smiled and said, "Hall master still needs you to help with some chores. You're very busy, so I won't keep you. Send my regards to hall master." Yuqi smiled and immediately turned to leave. After Yuqi left, Wei Juduan looked at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, since hall master arranged for you to be a patrol, it means that hall master thinks highly of you. I also hope that you won't disappoint hall master. My previous patrol, Fang Jingyuan, died in an accident. His subordinates and the area he was in charge of will be handed over to you. You only need to remember one thing. The Guanzhong torture room has its own rules. There are rules in the open and in the dark. If you break the rules, even if you were recommended to the torture hall by Hero Chu, you won't be let off lightly." Chapter 149. Wei Juduan's words were as good as not saying anything at all. If anyone broke the rules, Guanxiu wouldn't spare them even if he didn't say anything. But who had the final say in the secret rules? However, Chu Xiu had just arrived, so whatever his superior said was naturally the law. Therefore, Chu Xiu didn't refute at all. He cupped his hands and said, "As you command, sir." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Wei Juduan nodded in satisfaction. He was afraid that Chu Xiu wouldn't know his position because he was recommended by Chu Yuanxing. Now it seemed that he knew his place. Chu Yuanxing's position in the Guanzhong torture room was indeed very high. Because he was Chu Kuanga's son, everyone was willing to give him face and give him the courtesy he deserved. But at the same time, if Chu Yuanxing interfered too much with the power of the Guanzhong torture room, a powerful torturer like Wei Juduan would be dissatisfied. Wei Juduan said to the other 5 torturers, "From now on, Chu Xiu will be your colleague, especially Wei Hanshan and Jiang Taoren. Your territories are next to Chu Xiu's, so you should help each other out." Among the two, Jiang Taoran was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He had the strength of the three-flower realm. Hearing this, he smiled at Chu Xiu, cupped his hands, and said, "Brother Chu, you and I will be colleagues from now on." Chu Xiu also stood up and cupped his hands in return. As for Wei Hanshan, he looked much younger. He only looked to be in his 30s and also had the strength of the three-flower realm. However, he had entered this realm much earlier than Jiang Taoran. In reality, he was already over 40 years old, but he looked relatively young. Facing Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan was much more casual. He only cupped his hands and called him Brother Chu. He didn't care about his reputation. He did not treat a physical invulnerability martial artist who entered through the back door as an equal. Wei Judwan coughed and said, "All right, that's all for today. All of you can return to your respective patrolling areas. Chu Xiu, after you go to the back hall to collect your clothes and the patrol envoy's token, you can take up your post." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and left with the other inspectors. The others did not have any intention of talking to Chu Xiu. Although there was no conflict of interest between them, it was clear that Chu Xiu was not qualified to be acknowledged by them with his background and strength. After collecting his clothes and waist tag, Chu Xiu left the Guanxi headquarters and headed to Jianzhou City in Jianzhou Prefecture. Guanxi was not as vast as northern Yen, so it was not divided into prefectures. It was only roughly divided into several prefectures. Jianzhou Prefecture under the jurisdiction of Guanxi was one of them. Jianzhou City was the center of Jianzhou Prefecture, and there were more than 10 small cities around it that were also under the jurisdiction of Jianzhou Prefecture. At this moment, the door of the patrol hall was tightly shut. 4 physical invulnerability Jianghu constables sat there in silence. The 4 of them were the strongest constables in the Jianzhou patrol hall. After the death of the previous patrol envoy, all the constables were under their control. One of them, a man in his 40s with a red knife scar on his face, laughed and said, "Everyone, don't be so quiet. The branch has already sent the news that the new patrol envoy will be taking up his post soon. We should discuss what to do, right?" Opposite him was a constable in his 50s. He wiped the long knife in his hand and said calmly, "What is there to discuss? Since the higher-ups have sent an important person, we should continue to follow orders. Otherwise, what do you want to do? Wu Saiping, I know you are ambitious, but you can't really think that the higher-ups will let you be the patrol envoy, right? The Guangzhong torture room is not the same as it was in the past. There are many capable people. Even if Lord Fang Jingyuan is dead, the new patrol envoy will not be a physical invulnerability martial artist like you. There are countless mighty ones in the sentencing bureau. Any one of them can be the patrol envoy." Wu Saiping snorted coldly and said, "Du Guangzhong, don't interrupt me. You know that's not what I'm talking about. During this period of time, there has been no patrol envoy, so we have only paid 60% of the taxes. The remaining 40% is split among us. Although I was the one who suggested this, the 3 of you have also taken it. Now that the new patrol envoy is here, this matter must not be leaked. Also, should we pay all the taxes or continue to hold it back?" The Guangzhong torture room was in between the Jianghu and the imperial court. Although it did not belong to any of the 3 countries, it still had all kinds of taxes. In particular, Guangzhong was originally the center of the 3 countries. The trade was unusually prosperous, and the taxes were a big part of the development of the Guangzhong torture room. Normally, the taxes would be collected by the lowest-ranking Jianghu constables and handed over to the patrol envoy. The patrol envoy would then hand it over to the torture chamber branch, and finally the branch would hand it over to the main hall. The main hall would hold back a portion of the taxes, and the rest would be distributed equally to the 3 countries. Therefore, in theory, the lowest-ranking Jianghu constables and patrol envoys were not allowed to hold back any of the taxes. All of them had to be handed over to the main hall, and the main hall would then distribute their salaries and cultivation resources according to their rank. Although this was a little troublesome, it could ensure that the Guangzhong torture room was fair and just. Now, the 4 of them actually dared to secretly hold back the taxes. This was a huge taboo. Du Guangzhong's hand that was wiping his long saber stopped abruptly. He said in a low voice, Are you crazy? When there's no one watching over us, we can play some tricks on the books. Now that the higher-ups have sent a patrol envoy, you still dare to do this? Are you tired of living? Wu Siping said coldly, Old Du, you are too timid. Look at the other patrol envoys. Which one of them doesn't have some gray income? It's only that stubborn Fang Jingyuan who doesn't know how to be flexible. Even the rest of us are poor. I used to have a sworn brother who works in the torture chamber's headquarters. Yesterday, he sent someone to tell me that the new patrol envoy is not a Jianghu constable. He was recommended by the Guanzhong hero Chu Yuanqing. He has never stayed in the Guanzhong torture room at all. He's just an outsider. The four of us working together, as long as we handle things on the surface, won't we be able to change the accounts in the dark? As long as we work together, it won't be a problem to make the other party a mere figurehead. An outsider becomes the patrol envoy of the Guanzhong torture room. He has no experience at all. Does he really think it's so easy to mingle in the Guanzhong torture room? Du Guangzhong was still a little hesitant, but no buts. Wu Siping directly interrupted his words. He turned his gaze to the other two and said, Qin Fang, Lu Qingli, what do you think? The other two thought for a while and gritted their teeth. Let's do it. If the new patrol envoy was a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room, they might not dare to play such tricks. But since it was an outsider who had never stayed in the Guanzhong torture room, they had some confidence. Wu Siping turned his gaze to Du Guangzhong and sneered, Old Du, the four of us are one. If you don't agree to this, you'll be cutting off our source of income. You know the consequences. Don't forget how Lord Fang died. The current Guanzhong torture room is not the previous Guanzhong torture room. Listening to Wu Siping's words with some killing intent, Du Guangzhong's expression changed slightly. Du Guangzhong was a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. His father was the Jianghu arrestor of the Guanzhong torture room. Wu Siping was a lone robber who killed people like scything flax when he was young. After he was caught by the Jianghu arrestor of the Guanzhong torture room, he was willing to repent and chose to join the Guanzhong torture room to serve them. Du Guangzhong didn't know whether he had really repented after so many years, but his ferocity didn't change much. And just like what Wu Siping said, the current Guanzhong torture room was not the previous Guanzhong torture room. As a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room, he felt it the most. Under the intense gaze of Wu Siping and the other two, Du Guangzhong could only nod with difficulty. At that moment, someone knocked on the door. A martial artist entered and said, Sir, the new inspector has entered the city. Wu Siping grinned and said, Let's go and welcome the new sir. The three of you, remember to have a good attitude. After all, this sir has a backer. After the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, passed away, the power of the entire inspector hall was in the hands of the four of them. Just like what Wu Siping said before, it was easy for the three of them to make the new inspector a figurehead. However, he wouldn't play such a low-level trick like putting him in his place. The Guanzhong torture room had its own rules. After all, the new inspector was an inspector, while they were just Jianghu arresters. Being one rank higher than them could crush others, so they couldn't afford to lose face. In Jianghu City, Chu Xiu rode a purplish-red horse and wore the black warrior attire of the Guanzhong torture room. On the left was a sword and saber symbol, just like the one erected at the entrance of the Guanzhong torture room. This also represented Chu Xiu's identity as an inspector. The disciplinary officers like Wei Judwan, who were in charge of an area, also wore such attire. However, the symbol of the sword and saber was on the right because the right was respected. This meant that their position was higher than that of the inspector. On the other hand, the symbol of the sword and saber in front of the disciplinary officer's chest was red. They were slightly different from the other Guanzhong torture room martial artists. However, existences at Wei Judwan's level could wear anything they wanted. As the pinnacle of power in the Guanzhong torture room, other than Guan Xiu, who was Guanzhong torture room chief, who didn't know them, Chu Xiu didn't ask where the inspector's hall was. The reason was simple. As the ruler of Guanzhong, the inspector's hall would definitely be in the center of the city. As expected, when Chu Xiu arrived at the inspector's hall, 4 physical invulnerability inspectors were already waiting for him. Seeing the sword and saber symbol embroidered on Chu Xiu's attire, Wu Saiping and the other three bowed to Chu Xiu in unison and said, "Greetings, sir." Chu Xiu jumped off the horse and said, "There's no need to be so polite. Are you the Jianghu constables mentioned by the inspector's hall?" Wu Saiping was about to answer, but when he felt the aura on Chu Xiu, he was stunned. Du Guangzhong and the others were the same. Physical invulnerability? The new inspector was actually only in the physical invulnerability stage. What kind of joke was this? Chapter 150. When Wu Saiping and the others saw that Chu Xiu was young, they didn't pay much attention. There were 5 tiers of qi-controlling realm. Among them, the inner and outer invulnerability were 1 tier of experience. The 3 flowers at one's prominence and 5 qis collecting were another, and the oneness of heaven and man was another. A big realm included 3 experiences and 5 small realms. When a martial artist stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, the essence, qi, and spirit in the body would be unified and reach the extreme. After condensing the 3 flowers at one's prominence, one's lifespan would be greatly increased, and one would be able to slow down aging. Therefore, the younger a martial artist was when they stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, the younger they would look in the future. Sometimes, 2 martial artists of the same age and the same realm would look like a young man and a middle-aged man. That was because the 2 of them were at different ages when they stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Therefore, when they first saw Chu Xiu, they subconsciously thought that Chu Xiu had stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence very early, which was why he looked young. However, when they got off the horse and got closer, they felt the aura on Chu Xiu's body. This guy didn't step into the 3 flowers at one's prominence early at all. His good friend at the main hall only told him that the new inspector was an outsider, but he didn't tell him that the new inspector was only in the physical invulnerability realm. This discovery immediately made Wu Saiping feel very sullen, and he even felt a bit unwilling and resentful. Just now, Du Guangzhong told him that even if the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died, the torture chamber wouldn't let him be the inspector because he was only in the physical invulnerability realm. However, as soon as he said this, the higher-ups sent a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm to be the inspector. He had no experience in the Guangzhong torture room and had no qualifications. Just because he was recommended to the torture chamber by the Guangzhong hero Chu Yuanxing, he could become an inspector in 1 step? Wu Saiping felt very unfair and very dissatisfied. When Chu Xiu saw the expressions of Wu Saiping and the others, he could roughly guess what they were thinking. Chu Xiu just said calmly, "Everyone, is there a problem?" Wu Saiping suppressed the emotions in his heart and cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu. "Of course, there's no problem. Please come in, sir." Chu Xiu and Wu Saiping entered the meeting hall and sat on the host seat. Chu Xiu took out his order and handed it to the 4 people and said, "This one is Chu Xiu. From today onwards, I will take over the position of patrol envoy. This is the order signed by Hall Leader Guan and Lord Wei. You can take a look." Wu Saiping smiled and said, "How can this thing be fake?" Subordinate Wu Saiping greets, sir. With that, Wu Saiping stood up and bowed to Chu Xiu. The other 3 also stood up and said in unison, "Subordinates Du Guangzhong, Lu Qingli, and Qin Fang greet, sir." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "You don't have to be so polite. I'm also new here, so I still need the help of a few veteran detectives." Du Guangzhong and the others looked at each other. This new patrol envoy seemed to be very easy to talk to. Although he was young, he didn't appear to be that overbearing. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "But because I'm new here, I don't know much about the information of the places under my command. As far as I know, the patrol envoy is mainly responsible for the daily activities of the territory under their command. Is there anything unusual during this period?" Wu Saiping shook his head and said, "Everything is calm, there's nothing unusual." Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed when he heard that. There wasn't a patrol inspector overseeing the territory for a month, and there are a few cities around the trade route. You're telling me that there weren't any abnormalities during this period? Wu Saiping said lightly, "Nothing means nothing. This should be a good thing. Does Sir want something to happen in our territory?" Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at Wu Siping in surprise. Just now, the person who said that he wouldn't put the new patrol envoy in his place was Wu Siping, but now Wu Siping seemed to be at odds with this Sir Chu Xiu, which confused them. In fact, Wu Siping's thinking was very simple. If the new patrol envoy had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence, then he would naturally have to keep a low profile and play some tricks in the dark. However, the other party was only at the physical invulnerability stage, which made him a little dissatisfied. At the same time, he also felt a little more confident. In his opinion, this new patrol envoy was just someone who got his position because of Chu Yuanxing's recommendation. Wu Siping wasn't afraid of the other party at all. Although Chu Yuanxing's status in the Guangzhong torture room was high, he still couldn't interfere with the specific affairs of the torture chamber. That would break the rules of the torture chamber and cause some people in the torture chamber to be dissatisfied. In the past, it was one thing for Chu Yuanxing to plant people in the Guangzhong torture room. Most of the time, he did it unintentionally and with good intentions. However, if those people suffered any grievances in the torture chamber and went to Chu Yuanxing to stand up for them, then would the Guangzhong torture room belong to him, Chu Yuanxing, or Guanxiu? Although Chu Yuanxing was a little naive, he at least knew when to advance and when to retreat. He would never interfere in such things. Putting aside his identity as Chu Yuanxing, Wu Siping didn't think he was inferior to the other party at all. Chu Xiu looked at Wu Siping for a while, then turned his head to Du Guangzhong and the others and said, "The territory under your jurisdiction is also peaceful?" The three of them hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The four of them had a common weakness in each other's hands. Moreover, they had already reached an agreement just now. Now, they would naturally suffer together. Seeing this scene, a cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. As a superior, it was actually not a good thing for his subordinates to be too united. This was because it would easily lead to deceiving his superiors and subordinates. In the past, because Chu Xiu was too close to the Ghost Hand King and the others, the Heavenly Sin branch leader tried to sow discord between them. Unfortunately, he failed in the end. This was because his methods weren't brilliant, and Chu Xiu and the Ghost Hand King weren't idiots. They didn't expose this matter, but they still had a certain sense of distance when doing things. It was very ironic now that Chu Xiu actually encountered such a situation. However, this time, he was the superior, and his subordinates were even more ruthless. They actually dared to unite in front of him to undermine him. Were the constables of the Guangzhong torture room so bold? However, at this time, Chu Xiu didn't flare up. He just said lightly, "It's good that it's peaceful. It means that my work in the future will be very easy. Alright, all of you can leave." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Wu Siping couldn't help but smile. He cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Then I'll take my leave." He had already expected this scene. There were only 3 reactions from Chu Xiu. The first one was to turn hostile on the spot, but that would be embarrassing himself. Anyway, Wu Siping and the others had done enough to save face. What else did Chu Xiu want? The second one was to use his status to oppress others, but it was also useless. They were all veterans of the Guangzhong torture room. It wasn't easy to deal with the constables of the physical invulnerability realm. At least, Chu Xiu didn't have the qualifications to do so. They had to report to the Guanxi torture room branch. Only when they had enough evidence could they take action against him. Not to mention that they couldn't find fault with their attitude. Even if they scolded Chu Xiu, it still wouldn't be a crime worthy of death. At most, they would be transferred away from Chu Xiu's subordinates. Anyway, they had taken what they should take. Even if they were transferred away, they would still be constables in the Jianghu torture room. On the other hand, Chu Xiu would leave Wei Juduan with the impression that he was incompetent and couldn't even manage his own subordinates. As for the last one, it was to act as if nothing had happened and bear with it. After exiting the inspector hall, Du Guangzhong said in a low voice, "Didn't we go too far today?" Wu Siping sneered and said, "Too far? We just wanted to let this young inspector know the reality. That is, who is in charge here. He didn't make things difficult for us. We helped him handle the matters in the territory properly. All he needed to do was sit there and wait for the credit to fall into his hands. If he really doesn't know what's good for him, then we will make him suffer for a while. That way, he will know that the waters of the Guanzhong torture room are deep. You all saw the inspector's attitude today. He isn't an idiot. He knows to bear with it. What are you all worried about? Du Guangzhong and the others nodded. They felt that what Wu Siping said made sense. It was a pity that they didn't understand Chu Xiu. Under normal circumstances, Chu Xiu could indeed bear with it. However, there was a knife above the word bear. After he had endured, it was usually to make the knife stronger and sharper. After nightfall, Chu Xiu stayed in the inspector hall. Of course, Chu Xiu could also buy a big house outside. After all, the Guanzhong torture room didn't require torturers and inspectors to stay in the branch and hall. A blood condensation realm constable on night duty brought Chu Xiu to his residence. After arranging some daily necessities, he was about to leave in a hurry. If it was under normal circumstances, a small constable like him would definitely take the opportunity to curry favor with a new inspector. However, he didn't dare to do so now. The inspector hall was only so big. All the constables who came and went knew that the new inspector was only in the physical invulnerability realm. Moreover, he was an outsider. Not only did he fail to control the situation, but he was also captured by Sir Wu Siping. Although it was rumored that this inspector had suffered in front of a few constables, he wasn't someone a small constable like him could afford to offend. Therefore, his attitude was still respectful. However, he didn't dare to speak too much to the new inspector. Otherwise, what would happen if Sir Wu Siping and the others found out? He was just an ordinary small constable. At this moment, he had already made up his mind. He wouldn't offend either side, nor would he curry favor with either. The battle between the big shots had nothing to do with a small fry like him. However, this was how things were. What one feared would happen. Just as the small constable was about to leave, he heard Chu Xiu say softly, "Don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you." Chapter 151. Hearing Chu Xiu's voice, the young constable put on a long face and said, "Sir, I really don't know anything." Chu Xiu said, "You know what I want to ask you, so you say you don't know anything?" The young constable said helplessly, "Sir, I can't afford to offend you and Sir Wu Siping. Why do you have to make things difficult for a small fry like me?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Since you know you can't afford to offend me, why waste your breath? Wu Siping isn't here now, but I'm right in front of you. Close the door. Don't worry, I won't leak anything you say. Of course, if you don't say anything, then you're offending me." The little constable was dumbfounded. The lord in front of him was clearly unreasonable. What could he do? Therefore, the young constable could only close the door obediently. He said helplessly, "Sir, please ask whatever you want to ask. However, I've only joined the Guanzhong torture room for a few years. I've only joined Sir Fang a few months ago. Therefore, I don't know much." Chu Xiu said, "Don't worry, I won't ask you anything that will make things difficult for you. However, you'd better not play any tricks. You're not the only one on duty in the patrol hall. I'll ask the others what I got from you. If the two of you say different things, you know the consequences." The young constable was speechless. Although this new sir was young, he was very scheming. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to play any tricks in front of him. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous. What I'm asking is not a secret. Wu Siping and the other physical invulnerability Jianghu constables, what's their background and their relationship with each other?" Hearing Chu Xiu's question, the young constable heaved a sigh of relief. Almost everyone in the patrol hall knew about this. It was indeed not a secret. Even though the door was closed, the constable still lowered his voice and said, "Among the 4 constables, Lord Du Guangzhong is a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. He has been a constable in the Guanzhong torture room since his father's generation. When Wu Siping was young, he was said to have been a great bandit of the Jianghu. His methods were ruthless and he killed people like flies. In the end, he was captured by the punishment hall when he acted in Guanzhong. Instead, he chose to serve the punishment hall. As for Mr. Lu Qingli and Mr. Qin Fang, their family background was very ordinary. They were all ordinary people in Guanzhong. When they were young, they were selected to be trained in Guanzhong torture room because of their good talent. They started from the lowest level of arrestor and became Jianghu arrestors now. As for their relationship, this subordinate can't say. However, Sir Wu Siping is the strongest, and he is usually very forthright with his subordinates, so he is loved and respected by everyone. Lord Du Guangzhong couldn't stand Sir Wu Siping's Jianghu aura, so both sides didn't see eye to eye. They had quarreled before, but there was no conflict. As for Mr. Lu Qingli and Mr. Qin Fong, they have been in the Guangzhong torture room for so many years and have their own loyal subordinates. They usually don't get too close to anyone, nor do they have any conflict with anyone. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. Previously, the four people's attitude was obviously that they had joined forces to control him, and even wanted to make him a mere figurehead. However, listening to the young constable's words, the four people's relationship wasn't that good before. It could only be said that it wasn't too bad. However, now that he had arrived, the four of them were all targeting him. This was very strange. There must be a reason for them to do this. It could be for benefits, or it could be a common threat. However, Chu Xiu didn't consider this point. He only said to the young constable, "All right, you can go." Hearing Chu Xiu's order, the young constable then left as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. In the morning of the next day, Chu Xiu sat alone in the inspector's hall. However, he sat there for a whole day without doing anything. Of course, the Guangzhong torture room wouldn't be so idle. However, the structure of the Guangzhong torture room was from the bottom to the top. The constable at the lowest level patrolled the area. Once they found something, they had to report it to the Jianghu constable above them. If the Jianghu constable could solve it, they would solve it themselves. If they couldn't, they had to inform the inspector above them. Normally, even if the Jianghu constables solved the problem by themselves, they had to report it to the inspector above them. However, Wu Siping intercepted all the news from below and dealt with it himself. He wouldn't report it to Chu Xiu at all. If Chu Xiu asked, all he had to do was say that it was peaceful. What could Chu Xiu do to him? The four of them had been in the inspector's hall for at least 10 years. Their prestige was deeply rooted. As long as they didn't say anything, it was impossible for Chu Xiu to bypass them and directly command the lower-level constables. In other words, they wanted to make Chu Xiu a figurehead. An inspector was still an inspector, just that he didn't have any real power. At this time, in a room at the inspector's hall, Wu Siping and the other three were all there. There were some dishes and wine in front of them. They looked very relaxed. Every Jianghu constable had an office in the inspector's hall. This place was Wu Siping's office and study. However, at this time, he treated it as a tavern. Du Guangzhong held a wine glass and said, "Aren't we going a little overboard by doing this?" Wu Siping smiled disdainfully and said, "Old Du, you're a little too timid." It's not like the Guangzhong torture room has never had an inspector who was just a figurehead over the years. You're not capable enough, so who can you blame? This Chu Xiu isn't even Hall Leader Guan's disciple. What's there to be afraid of? Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "I'm not talking about that. After all, Chu Xiu joined the Guangzhong torture room because of Great Hero Chu. If we do this, aren't we not giving Great Hero Chu face?" Wu Siping squinted his eyes and said, "Old Du, don't talk so much nonsense. You should know who's in charge of the Guangzhong torture room now. Great Hero Chu also knows his limits. Why can't the person he recommended be just a figurehead? All these years, Great Hero Chu has recommended many people to the Guangzhong torture room. Have you seen who he has ever cared about? Great Hero Chu knows what he's doing. And old Du, since you've already done it, there's no turning back. You've already collected all the taxes that should have been paid. Yesterday, you also offended the inspector. Why, do you want to turn back now? It's too late." Du Guangzhong snorted coldly and said, "Who said I regret it? I'm just telling you to be careful. Don't be too arrogant and make things worse. If you really fall out with him, it won't do anyone any good." Although he said so, Du Guangzhong was secretly shaking his head. The Guangzhong torture room had really changed a lot over the years. When he had just joined the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga was still the hall master. At that time, the Guangzhong torture room was definitely not like this. But now, the power of the Guangzhong torture room was several times or even 10 times stronger than before. However, the internal situation had changed a lot. People like Wu Siping who joined later no longer had much memory and respect for great hero Chu. Opposite him, Wu Siping chuckled and said, "It's good that you don't regret it. Come, let's drink." Just as he was about to raise his glass, someone suddenly knocked on the door. A constable walked in and said, "Sirs, the inspector wants to invite Sir Du Guangzhong over." Wu Siping frowned and said, "He wants to invite old Du over alone?" The constable nodded. Du Guangzhong was also puzzled and said, "Why does he want to invite me over?" Wu Siping waved his hand casually and said, "I think it's a little tricky to deal with the four of us together, so he wants to take us down one by one. Old Du, you just have to control yourself. Say what you should and don't say what you shouldn't. Anyway, just be respectful and say a few perfunctory words." Du Guangzhong nodded in puzzlement. Although he did not understand why Chu Xiu would invite him first, he still followed the constable out. After he left, Qin Fong frowned and said, "There won't be any problems, right?" Wu Siping said indifferently, "Don't worry. Old Du is usually a little overcautious, but it's not for nothing that he could survive in the Guangzhong torture room for so many years. He knows what to say and what not to say. When he comes back, I'll ask Chu Xiu what he said to him. I don't think there's anything new. Come, let's continue drinking." At that moment, Du Guangzhong came to Chu Xiu's study and knocked on the door. "Official Chu, I'm here. Come in." Chu Xiu's voice came from inside the room. When Du Guangzhong pushed the door open and entered, he found Chu Xiu sitting in the study, wiping his crimson, extremely magnificent long saber. "Close the door and sit down," Chu Xiu said without raising his head. Du Guangzhong was slightly puzzled. He thought that Chu Xiu was pretending to be profound, so he closed the door and sat down, ready to see what tricks Chu Xiu was playing. As a result, he sat there for a full hour, but Chu Xiu was still wiping his red sleeve saber. He even rubbed the saber until it was bright red and could be used as a mirror, but he still did not say a word. Du Guangzhong could not stand it anymore. He couldn't help but say, "What does official Chu want from me? If there's nothing else, I'll leave. There are still many things that I need to deal with in the inspector hall." Hearing that, Chu Xiu raised his head and said slowly, "Constable Du, are you in a hurry? Don't worry, it will be done soon." After that, Chu Xiu lowered his head and wiped the red sleeve saber in his hand again. This time, he actually wiped it for another hour. Until Du Guangzhong really could not stand it anymore, Chu Xiu took the initiative to say, "I heard that Constable Du also uses a saber?" Du Guangzhong was suddenly stunned and subconsciously said, "Yes." "What do you think about sabers, Constable Du?" Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Du Guangzhong was stunned. He did not know what Chu Xiu meant by this question. He had to perfunctorily say, "It's a weapon. I've been practicing it since I was a child. What else can I think about it?" Chu Xiu put the red sleeve saber in his hand on the table and said in a deep voice, "Weapons also have a spirit. After being nourished, the wizard weapon above the 7th transformation will have a spirit. This spirit is not given by the heaven and earth, but by the user. The sword is the leader of all weapons. It can be yin or yang, and it has thousands of changes. The saber is the king of all weapons. It has the aura of a king and is domineering. It is incomparably sharp and moves forward. This is my view on saber." Chapter 152. Du Guangzhong found Chu Xiu's explanation of the saber novel. Although he was an old man in the Guangzhong torture room, his father and grandfather's generation were just ordinary low-level constables. They didn't even have a physical invulnerability expert. His generation was already the strongest in the Du family. A martial artist of this level could only be considered decent in the underworld. It could be said that he had just stepped into the threshold of martial arts. His understanding of martial arts was very rough. To them, a saber was a saber. What else could it be? After listening to Chu Xiu's words, Du Guangzhong seemed to have understood something. He even pondered for a while. But then Du Guangzhong came to his senses. Why did he come here? He couldn't help but ask Chu Xiu, Official Chu, it's been 2 hours. What do you want? You can't just talk about sabers and swords with me, right? Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, It's fine. You can leave now. Chu Xiu's words stunned Du Guangzhong. Then, a trace of anger appeared in his eyes. If Chu Xiu wasn't an inspector, he would have fallen out with him long ago. He found me, sat with me for 2 hours, and asked me to leave after saying a few words. What is this? Is he messing with me? Du Guangzhong snorted and turned to leave in dissatisfaction. But at the moment when Du Guangzhong turned around, Chu Xiu sheathed his saber. The sharpness in his eyes was not inferior to the red-sleeve saber that he polished. At this time, in Wu Siping's room, Wu Siping and the other two were waiting anxiously. Previously, they thought that Du Guangzhong was just pretending to be courteous with Chu Xiu and would come out soon. But it had been 2 hours. What were they talking about? Even if they were pretending to be courteous, it wouldn't take so long. Wu Siping sent his confidant to check, but it was useless. The door of Chu Xiu's study was closed. He couldn't hear anything at all. This made Wu Siping a little confused. At this time, Du Guangzhong came back. Wu Siping said quickly, Old Du, what did Chu Xiu say to you? Du Guangzhong said subconsciously, Nothing. As soon as he said this, Wu Siping, Lu Chengli and Qin Fang's gazes changed. Chu Xiu had called him into the study for an hour, but now Du Guangzhong said that Chu Xiu didn't say anything. It was too obvious that Du Guangzhong was trying to brush him off. Feeling the gazes of the three, Du Guangzhong said quickly, I really didn't say anything. Official Chu just talked to me a little about saber skills. Hearing this, Wu Siping sneered and said, I didn't see it before. Old Du, your saber skills are so profound that even the inspector sent by the higher-ups wanted to learn from you. But the key is, do you believe it yourself? Du Guangzhong was helpless. He said hurriedly, Listen to my explanation. Wu Siping waved his hand and interrupted Du Guangzhong. Old Du, you and I are now in the same boat. No matter what Chu Xiu promised you, it's just an empty promise. Embezzlement is a big crime. It's fine if no one reports it. But once it is reported, we're finished. Chu Xiu can't protect you either. Now I'll give you one last chance. What did Chu Xiu say to you? Or should I say, what did he promise you? Du Guangzhong looked like he was going crazy. Chu Xiu really didn't say anything to me. He didn't promise me anything. How can I explain it to him? Wu Siping sneered. Well, Du Guangzhong, I underestimated you. You've decided to surrender to the new lord so quickly. Are you going to help me in my hour of need? Then let's wait and see who will have the last laugh. Finishing his words, Wu Siping sneered and turned to leave. Lu Chengli and Qin Fang also took a deep look at Du Guangzhong and left. No matter where, traitors were always the most hateful. Obviously, in their eyes, Du Guangzhong was a traitor. Looking at the three of them leaving, Du Guangzhong's heart sank. Things seemed to be getting out of hand. This misunderstanding couldn't be explained clearly. At this time, he suddenly remembered Chu Xiu's previous actions. Chu Xiu had called him over for no reason, but in the end, he didn't say a word and only talked to him about some inexplicable things before letting him leave. Could it be that Chu Xiu did this on purpose? Thinking of this, Du Guangzhong felt a chill in his heart. If this was really the case, Chu Xiu was too terrifying. He didn't say anything and didn't promise anything, but he had already caused a rift between the four of them. Du Guangzhong left in a daze. Now, his mind was full of thoughts about what he should do to explain to Wu Siping and the others. But the problem was that what he said was the truth. Chu Xiu didn't say anything to him at all. If he went back and told Wu Siping and the others that Chu Xiu promised him something to win him over, would they believe him? Just like this, Du Guangzhong struggled for a night and didn't know how to explain. Right now, the four of them were actually in the same boat. There were no benefits between them, but they had their own weaknesses. If they fell out because of this inexplicable reason, the only one who would benefit would be Chu Xiu. The next morning, Du Guangzhong had just come out of his residence when he ran into Chu Xiu. Because of yesterday's incident, Du Guangzhong guessed that he had been schemed against by Chu Xiu, so he didn't have a good attitude towards Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu went up to greet him and said, Constable Du is up early. Come with me to the Guangzhong General Hall today. Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "Why are we going there?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It doesn't matter what we are going to do. Do you think I will eat you up?" Du Guangzhong was just about to find an excuse to refuse when Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't refuse. Don't forget, I am the patrol inspector now. Can I ask you to temporarily put down all your subordinates' matters?" Du Guangzhong gritted his teeth and said, "Of course I can." Even if Chu Xiu didn't have any real power as the patrol inspector at the moment, and the few of them were only pretending to obey Chu Xiu and preparing to make him a mere figurehead, he was still the patrol inspector after all. If they really fell out, they would also be punished. Hearing Du Guangzhong's agreement, Chu Xiu asked someone to find 2 fast horses and followed Du Guangzhong to Guangzhong. After they left, Wu Saiping's confidant immediately told him the matter. Wu Saiping called Lu Qingli and Qin Fang over and sneered, "Yesterday, Du Guangzhong just finished a secret talk with Chu Xiu and today he followed Chu Xiu to Guangzhong. If there is no deal between them, who would believe it?" Lu Qingli said hesitantly, "Yesterday I thought about it. Old Du shouldn't be an idiot. What is the benefit of him siding with this Chu Xiu? The 4 of us have something on each other. If he's siding with Chu Xiu, it is equivalent to sending his own weakness to Chu Xiu. At that time, he will naturally be at the mercy of Chu Xiu. Will he do such a thing? So I feel that there should be some misunderstanding. Today, he followed Chu Xiu to Guangzhong. It should be Chu Xiu's order. After all, he is the patrol inspector now. We can't refute things like face." Wu Saiping snorted coldly and said, "Whether it is true or false will be seen with one look. I have brothers at the headquarters. I will send a letter to them to help me keep an eye on Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong. We will see if this is a misunderstanding or if Du Guangzhong really betrayed us." The Guangzhong area was so large. If they relied on sending letters to pass messages, it would be too late when something really happened. Therefore, in the Guangzhong area, each of the Hall of Inspectors had a formation to transmit information to each other. However, the consumption of the formation was a bit high. Other than the important information being transmitted through the formation, the rest of the unimportant information still had to be transmitted through manpower. But now that Wu Saiping had decided to make Chu Xiu a figurehead, he naturally didn't have to care about those rules and directly used public tools for private purposes. At this time, after Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong set off, Du Guangzhong held it in for a long time and finally couldn't help asking Chu Xiu, "You did it on purpose yesterday?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course it was on purpose." Du Guangzhong was stunned. He didn't think that Chu Xiu would say it so directly without any concealment. Since Chu Xiu had made it clear, Du Guangzhong didn't hide it anymore. He snorted coldly and said, "Official Chu, do you think you can drive a wedge between us with these little tricks?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "But there's already a rift between you guys, isn't there? I know you guys aren't convinced of me. How can an outsider like me sit in this position so easily? If it were me, I wouldn't be convinced either. But it's important to know one's own limitations. Just based on the 4 of you with your own schemes, do you think it's possible to make me a figurehead?" Du Guangzhong sneered and said, "The waters of the Guangzhong torture room are deep. The entire Guangzhong area is filled with martial artists from all over the pugilistic world. The Guangzhong torture room is naturally the same. In history, there were inspectors who were made a figurehead by their subordinates, and there were even disciplinary officers who were made a figurehead by their subordinates. There are rules in the Guangzhong torture room. It's not like other places where you can sit in a high position just because you know how to fight and kill." Chu Xiu didn't argue. He just smiled and said, "All right, we'll wait and see." After a few days, Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong arrived at Guangzhong City. However, after arriving at Guangzhong City, Chu Xiu just casually strolled around the disciplinary hall before bringing Du Guangzhong to look for Chu Yuanxing. Last time, Chu Yuanxing was chased by people and had yet to recover. During this period of time, he had been resting at home. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come and had someone to drink with him, Chu Yuanxing was in a good mood. "Brother, did something happen in the territory this time?" Chu Xiu gave some of the gifts he bought to the servants and said with a smile, "It's nothing, everything is going well. It's just that I can stand firm in the Guanzhong torture room because of your help, so today I'm here to thank you. By the way, this is my subordinate, Constable Du Guangzhong of the pugilistic world. He also admires you very much. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to find the way, so I brought him here. Du Guangzhong, who was beside Chu Xiu, bowed to Chu Yuanxing with an excited expression and said, "Greetings, Hero Chu." Chapter 153. In all fairness, Du Guangzhong still respected Chu Yuanxing. However, this respect did not come from Chu Yuanxing, but from Chu Yuanxing's father, Wuxia, Chu Kuanga. When Du Guangzhong first joined the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga was still in power. Chu Kuanga's charisma was indeed very strong. Even Du Guangzhong, who had never had any contact with Chu Kuanga, respected him. In his heart, the Guanzhong torture room at that time was the Guanzhong torture room at its peak. Now that Chu Kuanga was dead, his legacy had been passed on to Chu Yuanxing. Du Guangzhong still respected him, but not to the same extent as Chu Kuanga. For example, now that Chu Yuanxing asked him to listen to Chu Xiu, Du Guangzhong might agree, but whether he would execute it or not was an unknown. Originally, Chu Yuanxing thought that Chu Xiu had something to ask of him. However, Chu Xiu just had a meal with Du Guangzhong and then left. Even Du Guangzhong did not understand what Chu Xiu meant. However, Chu Xiu knew that what he had done in Guanzhong City with Du Guangzhong would definitely be reported to Wu Saiping. After all, the other party was an old man who had been in the Guanzhong torture room for more than a decade. He definitely had some connections. Chu Xiu was right. After Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong left Guanzhong City, a middle-aged warrior immediately wrote down what Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong had done in the city and passed it to the inspector hall. This person used to be like Wu Saiping, a Jianghu bandit. However, Wu Saiping was forced to surrender after being captured by the Guanzhong torture room. He was inspired by Wu Saiping and chose to join the Guanzhong torture room to clear his name, so the two naturally became good friends. His talent and strength were better than Wu Saiping's, so he was directly selected by the sentencing department and joined them. Wu Saiping, on the other hand, started as an ordinary constable. The relationship between the two was not bad. Every time Wu Saiping came to Guanzhong City, the two would meet up. Therefore, he did not refuse the simple task of using his authority to pass on information. He knew about Wu Saiping's situation. His friend was arrogant and ambitious. Even the inspector who had reached the stage of 3 flower at once prominence couldn't control him, let alone the inspector who had reached the stage of physical invulnerability. However, he also happened to hear about Chu Xiu from other people's conversations. Although the Longhu list had spread throughout the Jianghu, for warriors like him who were no longer young, they did not pay much attention to it. Moreover, Chu Xiu was not one of the most famous people on the list. Therefore, when he first learned about Chu Xiu's identity, he was also stunned. He did not expect Chu Xiu to have such a strong background. He turned out to be a talent on the Longhu list. No wonder he could become an inspector right after joining the torture hall. Wu Saiping probably did not know about Chu Xiu's identity, so he also wanted to advise Wu Saiping to be careful and not treat Chu Xiu as an ordinary young physical invulnerability martial artist. Chu Xiu did not get his current position just because of his relationship with Chu Yuanxing. Therefore, he wrote another message and was about to pass it to Wu Saiping. However, he did not expect the formation pattern on the message formation to flicker and suddenly die out. "It's broken?" The warrior frowned, but he was not too worried. He just kept the letter with Chu Xiu's real identity and went out to find a formation master in the Guanzhong torture room to repair it. The message formation was often used, so it was not a big deal. He just needed to find a formation master to repair it. However, the repair time was a little long. A few days was considered fast, and a slow one could even take a month. But it did not matter. Anyway, there was more than one message formation in the Guanzhong torture room. However, he could only use this message formation at will. He could not touch the others. Therefore, this letter could not be sent to Wu Saiping for the time being. At this time, in the Guanxi region, in the inspector hall under the command of Chu Xiu, Wu Saiping received the news from Guanzhong City with a gloomy expression. He found Lu Yuqing and Qin Fang and threw the news in front of them. He snorted and said, "Look, Du Guangzhong has completely surrendered to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu personally brought him to see Chu Yuanxing. I guess he used this to entice him to stand on Chu Xiu's side." And that idiot actually agreed. Lu Yuqing and Qin Fang also frowned. This time, they did not doubt it anymore. They had known Du Guangzhong for more than 10 years. They knew that the person Du Guangzhong admired the most was the former hall master of the Guangzhong torture room, giant hero Chu Kuanga. Now, if Chu Xiu used Chu Yuanxing to make Du Guangzhong surrender, it was also very likely. The crux of the problem was, did Du Guangzhong tell them what they had done? Wu Saiping's expression turned cold. "We can't care so much. If that thing is exposed, we'll all be in trouble." "Then what do you want to do?" Lu Qingli asked. Wu Saiping did not answer him. He just said, "Don't forget, we've burned the account books. There's no evidence for that thing." Qin Fang said with a gloomy face, "There's no evidence, but Du Guangzhong is the witness. He knows all the things recorded in the account book. When the time comes, it will be very easy for him to check the records one by one." Warriors had strong spiritual force, so their memory was naturally much better than ordinary people. It was not a problem for them to memorize an account book. In fact, he did the same thing. In order to prevent accidents, he directly memorized the entire account book. Wu Saiping's eyes revealed a trace of killing intent. "The material evidence was burned by us, and the witness was killed by us. Then won't there be no evidence?" "Wu Saiping, are you crazy?" Lu Qingli and Qin Fang immediately stood up. Their eyes were filled with horror. Wu Saiping's meaning was very clear. He actually wanted to kill Du Guangzhong. There was internal strife in the Guangzhong torture room. There was competition between the 4 disciplinary officers. There were so many inspectors under Wei Juduan, so naturally there was competition too. They fought for credit, resources, and so on. But no matter how internal strife, there was a limit. Killing a colleague was a big taboo in Guangzhong. Even if the Guangzhong torture room's Jianghu constables made a mistake, they had to be escorted to the branch hall or the headquarters in Guangzhong City to be convicted before they could be dealt with. They could not simply kill, not to mention killing a colleague without reason. Wu Saiping raised his head and said with a cold expression, "I'm not crazy. This is just the best solution. Don't tell me you don't know how the previous patrol inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died? It's just killing. What's so great about it? We are all Jianghu constables. Is it difficult to set up a perfect murder scene? You two are too timid to do it. Let me do it. I've long disliked that old man Du Guangzhong." After that, Wu Saiping turned around and left. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang looked at each other helplessly. They couldn't stop Wu Saiping from leaving. In the past, Wu Saiping was a Jianghu bandit. A bandit was not a godly thief. One relied on skills, while the other relied on violence. In the Jianghu, large groups of bandits robbed traveling merchant caravans. A lone bandit like Wu Saiping looked for opportunities to kill and rob. If there was a chance, it was not like he had never done something like exterminating an entire family. Later on, when he was captured by the Guangzhong torture room, his ferocious nature was restrained. But looking at it now, Wu Saiping was still the same Wu Saiping, crazy and ruthless. On the way back, Du Guangzhong felt a little lost. It was not because of Chu Xiu, but because of Chu Yuanxing. When he was young, he saw Chu Kuanga as his idol. He hoped that he could become someone like Chu Kuanga. In his heart, Chu Juxia was a godlike figure. As he grew older, he also knew that in this Jianghu full of interests and killing, it was already a great fortune to have a Chu Kuanga appear. Although this Guangzhong hero, Chu Yuanxing, had inherited Chu Kuanga's legacy, in Du Guangzhong's eyes, he was too ordinary. He was so ordinary that he couldn't even see the shadow of Chu Kuanga in Chu Yuanxing. Chu Xiu said beside him, "Why? Are you disappointed that Chu Yuanxing didn't inherit Chu Juxia's legacy?" Du Guangzhong hurriedly said, "I don't have the right to be disappointed." Chu Xiu said lightly, "It's actually very normal. People are different, even if Chu Yuanxing is Chu Juxia's son. There are many people in this Jianghu who need people like Chu Juxia, but there are even more people who don't want to see another Chu Juxia appear. If Chu Yuanxing was like his father, he wouldn't have lived until now, even with the protection of the Guangzhong torture room. Du Guangzhong was a little emotional, but before he could finish, Chu Xiu said, "Constable Du, in fact, you should be worried about yourself now. Previously, there was only a rift between you and Wu Saiping, but now, I'm afraid that it's not just a rift between you. It should be about to break up. I don't know what agreement you have, so I'm also very curious about how Wu Saiping will deal with you after you break up." Du Guangzhong's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly said, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Constable Du, think about what you did after you arrived in Guangzhong City." Du Guangzhong was at a loss for a moment. What did he do? He didn't seem to have done anything. Moreover, Chu Xiu didn't try to rope him in or anything along the way. Besides, he had been misunderstood by Wu Saiping and the others as being roped in by Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu really tried to rope him in or threaten him, he was prepared to be perfunctory. But the problem was that Chu Xiu also didn't say anything. Seeing Du Guangzhong's expression, Chu Xiu couldn't help but shake his head and said, "Constable Du, you are a little too straightforward, so straightforward that I feel embarrassed to plot against you. You didn't do anything, but in the eyes of Wu Saiping and the others, you have done a lot. Once the seeds of suspicion germinate, it will make people think of many things." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Du Guangzhong's face suddenly turned pale. Du Guangzhong had fallen for the same thing twice. At this time, he wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 154. Among the 4 Jianghu arresters, Du Guangzhong was the oldest, but in fact, he was the most honest one. He was not as ambitious as Wu Saiping and slippery as Lu Qingli and Qin Fong. That was why Chu Xiu chose him as the target to sow discord among the 4. The first time, what Chu Xiu did only made them quarrel with each other, but they didn't break up. Just like Lu Qingli and Qin Fong, they only suspected Du Guangzhong. But this time, Chu Xiu turned their suspicion into fact. Although Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong didn't do anything, in other people's eyes, Du Guangzhong had already surrendered to Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu had already taken out his reward. When Du Guangzhong returned to the inspector hall of Jianghu City again, what awaited him was definitely to break up with Wu Saiping and the others. Du Guangzhong pointed at Chu Xiu, trembling with anger and speechless. Having been a constable in the pugilistic world for so many years, Du Guangzhong had captured countless villains. His methods were cruel and ruthless, but none of them were as sinister as Chu Xiu, easily playing with people's hearts in the palm of his hand. Of course, it was useless for Du Guangzhong to blame himself for falling in the same place twice. What had already happened. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Wu Saiping is an old man in Guangzhong torture room. He must have friends in the headquarters of Guangzhong City's torture room. This matter can't be hidden from others. Maybe Wu Saiping has already received the news now, and I'm thinking about how to deal with you. I don't know Wu Saiping, but you should know him well after working with him for so many years. How do you think he will deal with you?" Du Guangzhong's face suddenly changed when he heard this. It was because he had worked with Wu Saiping for so many years that he knew what kind of person Wu Saiping was on Earth. In the inspector hall of Jianghu City, most of the low-level arresters had a good impression of Wu Saiping. Although he had a strong sense of loyalty in the Jianghu, he was generous and forthright, and was loved by his subordinates. But these were all appearances. Deep down, Wu Saiping was still a vicious, crazy, and bloodthirsty bandit. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "So, since Wu Saiping and the others think you have surrendered to me, you might as well surrender to me. This isn't a lure or a threat. You have no other choice now." When facing Du Guangzhong, Chu Xiu did not use the great art of extinguishing heaven and earth, extinguishing soul shifting to affect his mind. Firstly, it was because he and Du Guangzhong were both in the physical invulnerability realm. The influence of the art of extinguishing heaven, destroying earth and soul transfer was limited and could only play a supporting role. Moreover, external forces were external forces. Now that he had used the heavens extinguishing earth extinguishing soul shifting technique to affect Du Guangzhong would definitely sense it in the future. If Chu Xiu wanted to use this person, he could not use such a method. Actually, according to Chu Xiu's character, the simplest way would be. Regardless of whether it was the way of the king or the way of the tyrant, the way of killing was always the most energy-efficient way. But this wasn't the Blue Dragon Society, but the Guanzhong torture room. It wasn't that easy to kill people. Moreover, Chu Xiu wanted to control a part of the power of the Guanzhong torture room. If he killed all his subordinates, how could Chu Xiu manage the dozens of cities around Jianghu city by himself? So, in dealing with this matter, killing was just a means, not the goal. Du Guangzhong laughed bitterly. Chu Xiu was right. Surrendering to Chu Xiu was his last choice. After Wu Siping and the others received the news, they would definitely break off relations with him. And if he didn't choose to surrender to Chu Xiu, he probably wouldn't have a good ending either. So, the best choice was to turn the act into reality and surrender to Chu Xiu. However, Du Guangzhong still smiled bitterly. You can surrender to official Chu, but I only hope to keep my life. Chu Xiu said in astonishment, since you have pledged your allegiance to me, I will naturally protect you. Don't you believe this? Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly. What I did with Wu Siping and the others was too big. I'm afraid you can't accept it, sir. Oh, what did you do? Du Guangzhong seemed to be going all out. He gritted his teeth and said, ever since the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died, the four of us worked together to keep 40% of the taxes that should have been handed over to the torture chamber. After splitting it evenly, we falsified the accounts. The previous account books have been burned. After saying that, Chu Xiu didn't say anything. He only said plainly, that's all? Du Guangzhong was surprised. Is that not enough? Official Chu, don't you mind? Chu Xiu asked in return, why should I mind? From Chu Xiu's point of view, this kind of thing couldn't be more normal. The previous boss was dead, and the new boss hadn't arrived yet. Wasn't it normal to take advantage of this time to gain some benefits? Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Du Guangzhong suddenly realized that he, Wu Siping, and the others had all thought wrong. The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was upright and even a little stubborn. Therefore, when Fang Jingyuan was in office, they didn't dare to play these little tricks. Moreover, Chu Xiu was recommended to the Guanzhong torture room through his relationship with Chu Yuanxing, the hero of Guanzhong. Therefore, Du Guangzhong and the others subconsciously thought that Chu Xiu would also be like Fang Jingyuan. Naturally, they didn't dare to let Chu Xiu have something on them. If they had known that Chu Xiu had such an attitude, cooperation might have been a good choice. However, Du Guangzhong secretly shook his head. If Chu Xiu had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence, cooperation would have been possible. However, with Wu Siping's personality, after seeing that Chu Xiu was only in the physical invulnerability realm, cooperation was no longer possible. However, at this time, Chu Xiu was interested. He asked, is withholding tax revenue a serious crime? Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly and said, it should be said that it's a capital crime. However, there are still people in the Guanzhong torture room who do this. But Du Guangzhong said, because the salary given to us by the higher-ups is too low. Now, the salary of the Guanzhong torture room has not changed for decades. It was set when Chu Kuangge was still here. However, that was then and this is now. When Chu Kuangge was still here, the Guanzhong torture room was not as strong as it is now. For example, at that time, an inspector could be a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm, but now, one has to be in the three-flower realm at one's prominence. Of course, you, official Chu, are an exception. Decades of salary was enough for the cultivation resources of a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm, but now it was given to experts in the three-flower realm at one's prominence or even the 5 Qis in the origin realm. Therefore, almost everyone in the Guanzhong torture room salary was on the low side, so some people had the idea of withholding tax revenue. This could be considered an unspoken rule in the Guanzhong torture room, but no one dared to reveal it. There were also some inspectors who had their own sources of income. In any case, they definitely wouldn't starve. It's just that the original Lord Fang of our hall is too stubborn. He doesn't allow this or that. This has led to the strength of our Jianghu city's hall being the weakest among all the patrol halls in Guanxi. Chu Xiu touched his chin. Sure enough, rumors were just rumors. It was impossible for there to be no conflicts and unspoken rules in a large force like the Guanzhong torture room. As for Wei Guanxiu, a hall master who led the Guanzhong torture room to its peak, did not raise the salary of all the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu could guess it with a little thought. It was not because she was stingy, but because this was a rule set by Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga's influence on the Guanzhong torture room was too great, so great that Guanxiu had to worry about her reputation. Such a small matter was definitely different in the eyes of the Guanzhong torture room's own people and outsiders. In the eyes of the Guanzhong torture room's own people, it should be a good thing that their salary had not been increased for decades. Almost no one would object to it. However, in the eyes of outsiders, if Guanxiu increased the salary of all the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room, it was somewhat to buy people's hearts. In the past, Chu Juxiao relied on his personal charm to build such a solid foundation and influence for the Guanzhong torture room. In the end, Guanxiu only relied on money to win people's hearts. Moreover, this also gave people a feeling that Guanxiu hinted that Chu Kuanga was stingy in the past. Gossip was a fearful thing, so this matter had been dragged on until now. Perhaps it would be dragged on until the next hall master, when the Guanzhong torture room had completely erased all traces of Chu Kuanga. Of course, these were not things that Chu Xiu needed to worry about. The inspector hall should have resolved the matter. By the time Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong returned to the inspector hall, Wu Saiping and the other two were already there. Seeing that Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong had returned, Wu Saiping's face did not show any murderous intent. He only chuckled and said, "Sir, you're back? Old Du has been gone for so long. There are many things that need to be dealt with." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "There's no hurry to deal with these matters. It just so happens that I have something to tell you. Follow me to the meeting hall." Wu Saiping secretly glanced at the expressionless Du Guangzhong and sneered in his heart. Did this new sir think that he could control them just because he had Du Guangzhong's support? Naive. After entering the meeting hall, everyone took their seats. Chu Xiu said, "Constable Du, close the door." Du Guangzhong obediently closed the door, but Wu Saiping and the other two felt that something was wrong. Wu Saiping frowned, stood up and said, "Sir, what do you mean by closing the door in broad daylight?" Chu Xiu played with the handle of the red sleeve knife in his hand and said indifferently, "Of course I'm going to say something that can't be known by outsiders. For example, the things that you did after the death of the previous inspector." As soon as he said this, Wu Saiping and the other two looked at Du Guangzhong together with a glaring murderous intent in their eyes. This traitor, he actually told this matter to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu pressed his hand down and said, "Why are you so agitated? I didn't say that I was going to report this matter." As soon as he said this, Wu Saiping and the others were stunned. Could it be that they had misjudged Chu Xiu's character from the beginning? Chapter 155. The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, had left a deep impression on everyone. In addition, because Chu Xiu was recommended by Chu Yuanxing, Wu Saiping and the others, like Du Guangzhong, thought that Chu Xiu was someone like Fang Jingyuan. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, it seemed that they were wrong. Could Chu Xiu tolerate them withholding the taxes? Wu Saiping laughed and said, "Why didn't official Chu say so earlier? You made us nervous for such a long time. There was no way to probe this kind of thing, and they didn't dare to do so. If Chu Xiu was really someone like Fang Jingyuan, wouldn't they be giving themselves away?" However, now that Chu Xiu had expressed his attitude, Wu Saiping and the other two heaved a sigh of relief. However, at this time, Chu Xiu was staring at Wu Saiping, who was laughing loudly. He said calmly, "Is it funny?" Wu Saiping stopped smiling and frowned. "Official Chu, what do you mean?" Although Chu Xiu had expressed his attitude just now, Wu Saiping still didn't have much respect for Chu Xiu. They were both in the physical invulnerability realm. In his early years, he was also a ferocious solo thief. After being subdued into the Guanzhong torture room, he was also the best Jianghu constable in the Jianghu inspector hall. He didn't think that he was inferior to Chu Xiu. If he had to say that he was inferior, he could only say that he was inferior because of luck. Of course, if Wu Saiping received the detailed information about Chu Xiu from his good friend, his attitude would probably change. But it was a pity that it was already too late. Chu Xiu looked at Wu Saiping and said coldly, "What do you mean?" "It's simple. I can tolerate you withholding the taxes, but I can't tolerate you being disrespectful to me. This is the Guanzhong torture room, not the Jianghu where you can do whatever you want. After staying in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years, haven't you learned how to respect your superiors?" Before Wu Saiping could say anything, the red sleeve knife in Chu Xiu's hand had been unsheathed. In an instant, the blood-refining god gang, which was more than 10 feet long, was slashed out. This knife shone brightly in the conference hall. The ferocious killing intent and evil chi slashed at Wu Saiping, which made Lu Qingli and Qin Fang dodge subconsciously. They all looked at Chu Xiu in horror. This was the first time they had seen Chu Xiu make a move, but no one had expected that the young man's strength would actually be to such an extent. They could not recognize such a powerful aura, but they could feel the dense pressure on the blood-refined divine aura. If it was any one of them, it would be extremely strenuous for them to receive the power of the blade. Wu Saiping's strength was stronger than the 3 people present. After all, he was a lone thief who could fight against several warriors of the Guanzhong torture room at the same level. In the end, the Guanzhong torture room even sent an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the head to capture him. The blood-refined deity shield did indeed make him feel an extremely heavy pressure. However, he immediately extended his hand and an icy blue precious weapon long saber appeared in his hand. The long saber swept out and the sharp edge danced. Saber astral energy gushed out like the wind, colliding head-on with Chu Xiu's blood-refined deity shield, causing a series of explosions. What Wu Saiping was good at was also the fast knife technique. It was as fast as the wind, and as explosive as fire. It was a pity that under Chu Xiu's blood-refining god gang, he could no longer display his fast and fierce knife momentum. Chu Xiu's attack this time was to establish his prestige. How could he give Wu Saiping a chance? The moment Wu Saiping blocked the blood-refining god gang with great difficulty, Chu Xiu's figure had already moved. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Wu Saiping. He formed a seal with both hands, and a bright golden gang chi suddenly burst out. Lin character formula, Great Vajra will seal. Among the 9 words formulas, Chu Xiu hadn't fully mastered them. However, now Chu Xiu could use 4 or 5 of them skillfully. Among them, the Great Vajra will seal, which was the most powerful and explosive, was also often used by Chu Xiu. Now, it was close to the point of perfection. The seal that was blooming with golden gang chi suddenly fell. Vajra suppresses the world, slays demons. Chu Xiu didn't have the compassion of the Buddhist sect, but Chu Xiu had some understanding of the fury of the Vajra. In the Buddhist sect's seal, there was actually a tyrannical and destructive aura. With a loud bang, the gang chi exploded. Among the debris were the fragments of weapons. The great Vajra wheel seal that Chu Xiu had used all his strength directly shattered the long knife in Wu Saiping's hand. It even sent his whole body flying, and blood immediately spurted out. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and without any hesitation he sent out another palm strike. The heaven-extinguishing earth-annihilating palm of the great violet sun was unleashed, and the powerful palm force brought with it an incomparably evil demonic flames of the purple sun, smashing into Wu Saiping's body. The scorching power caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Each of the 3 attacks was extremely fierce and explosive. It was like a crushing force, and it made Chu Xiu look like a god or a demon. It was incomparably terrifying. At this moment, Wu Saiping couldn't care less about being shocked. He only wanted to save his life. Taking the great Vajra wheel seal head-on had already injured his internal organs. The purple sun demonic flame of the great purple sun hand was still burning his meridians. If he didn't escape, he would definitely die at the hands of Chu Xiu. Wu Saiping formed a seal with both hands and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His gang chi was released, and it actually fused with the blood to condense a huge knife that was 10 feet long. With a whistling wind, It slashed at Chu Xiu. Splitting wind slash. Wu Saiping's body was the knife, and his gang chi was the sharp edge. He didn't have a knife in his hand, but the power of this slash was even more terrifying than when he held the knife in his hand. After this slash, Wu Saiping's figure didn't stop at all. He directly fled in the direction of the door. The red sleeve knife was held in Chu Xiu's hand. Wisps of black mist wrapped around the knife, and also lingered in Chu Xiu's eyes. Avicii demon knife, Hell's Gate opens. With the terrifying hatred and murderous intent of the endless hell, the knife came crashing down. Wu Saiping's seemingly powerful splitting wind slash was extremely fragile and directly smashed into pieces. Just when Wu Saiping felt the evil and terrifying power, but before he could turn his head, the pitch-black gang chi had already slashed across his neck. In an instant, his head was separated from his body, but the strange thing was that there was no blood flowing out of the wound. Dong! With a soft sound, Wu Saiping's head fell to the ground. Instantly, Lu Chengli and Qin Fang's faces turned pale. At this moment, they finally understood why Chu Xiu could become a patrol with the strength of a physical invulnerability expert. Although Chu Yuanxing's recommendation was important, what was more important was that Chu Xiu had the strength to do so. In the Jianghu City Patrol Hall, Wu Saiping's strength was almost the strongest, and he was also the one with the most abundant battle experience. However, when facing Chu Xiu, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. More importantly, Chu Xiu's unscrupulous attitude also terrified them. Previously, Wu Saiping had already revealed his killing intent towards Du Guangzhong. However, Wu Saiping had yet to make a move. Even if he were to make a move, he could only scheme in secret and create some accidents. It was impossible for him to be like Chu Xiu, who had slaughtered a constable in the patrol hall like he was slaughtering a chicken. Now that Wu Saiping was dead, what about the two of them? Previously, the two of them were also the ones who disrespected Chu Xiu. Moreover, even if there wasn't such a thing, Chu Xiu would still kill them to keep their mouths shut. Feeling Chu Xiu's gaze, Lu Chengli and Qin Fang suddenly shivered. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu took out an account book and said lightly, "This is the account book of your previous division of loot. You've already burned it." This one was written by Arrestor Du. Lu Chengli and Qin Fang looked at Chu Xiu with puzzlement, not understanding what Chu Xiu meant. As a result, Chu Xiu's gang chi burst out and tore the account book into pieces in a flash. Humans die for wealth, birds die for food. Why do we warriors join the Guangzhong torture room? It's too hypocritical to say that it's to protect the order in Guangzhong and the safety of the people. What we seek are nothing but two things: power and benefits. The salary of the Guangzhong torture room is too little, so we have to find a way ourselves. It's not a shameful thing, but... Chu Xiu's gaze looked straight at the two of them, and his voice was deep as if it directly penetrated into their hearts. But power and benefits can only be given by me. You can't steal or rob behind my back. Lu Chengli and Qin Fang weren't idiots. As soon as they heard what Chu Xiu said, they immediately understood Chu Xiu's meaning. If they chose to surrender, Chu Xiu could give them power and benefits. Of course, apart from this, they had no other choice. Just look at Wu Saiping, who couldn't be more dead. This was a lesson to be learned from the mistakes of others. So Lu Chengli and Qin Fang directly knelt down on one knee and said in a deep voice, "Greetings, Your Excellency." They were not bowing to Chu Xiu's identity as a patrol envoy, but to Chu Xiu himself. This was also a form of submission. Of course, it was submission under great pressure. Of course, it didn't matter whether they surrendered sincerely or were forced to surrender under threat. Chu Xiu only wanted the result, not the process. Chu Xiu said faintly, "All right, all of you get up. The four of you have secretly withheld 40% of the tax and are still acting so nervous. Isn't this a little too shameful? Don't worry, in the future, you will definitely be able to obtain more than what you have now." Just like what Chu Xiu had said, he had racked his brains to join the Guangzhong torture hall not to protect the order of the Guangzhong torture hall, but to seek wealth and power. These were the only two things he wanted. With the identity and power of the inspector, if Chu Xiu could only play such a low-level trick like intercepting the tax, he would be too useless. At this time, Du Guangzhong looked at Wu Saiping's corpse on the ground and said, "Your Excellency, how should we deal with Wu Saiping? Killing a colleague is a big taboo in the Guangzhong torture room. Without a proper reason, this matter will be very troublesome." Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Reason? People are troublesome when they are alive, but it's much simpler when they are dead. Arrestor Wu Saiping was accidentally killed when he was chasing a criminal and died in the line of duty. Is this reason enough? You are all experienced arresters in Jianghu. It should be very easy for you to fake the scene." Chapter 156. Chu Xiu's method was simple and crude, which made Du Guangzhong dumbfounded. However, when he thought about it carefully, he realized that it was indeed the case. The death of a Jianghu constable wasn't a big deal. As long as no one disclosed it, the higher-ups wouldn't investigate it. Chu Xiu's immediate superior was Wei Juduan. Would Wei Juduan investigate the death of an ordinary Jianghu constable? Wouldn't he be busy to death? As long as the reason and evidence were sufficient, it was fine to report it without arousing suspicion. Du Guangzhong hesitated, and Wu Saiping's subordinates, kill them all. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said lightly, "W." Du Guangzhong doubted his hearing. "Your Excellency, Wu Saiping had dozens of subordinates. Kill them all?" Lu Qingli and Qin Fang also looked at Chu Xiu in bewilderment. Killing dozens of people in one breath, what was Chu Xiu going to do? Was he going to break up the whole inspector hall? Chu Xiu said lightly, "Constable Du, you told me about Wu Saiping's background. He was originally a Jianghu bandit. His Jianghu temperament was too heavy. He was different from you Jianghu constables who were trained in the Guangzhong torture room. You used the rules of the Guangzhong torture room to restrain your subordinates, while he relied on the so-called Jianghu Code of Brotherhood. Although you don't like it, I have to say that his subordinates are far more loyal than yours. Moreover, none of Wu Saiping's subordinates came from the Guangzhong torture room. Almost all of them were born in the Jianghu. They were blinded by the so-called Brotherhood, so it's hard to say what they would do. Wu Saiping is already dead. I don't want to cause any trouble because of a dead man." Du Guangzhong and the other two didn't look good. In fact, it was true. The loyalty of their subordinates could only be said to be ordinary. In the past, they didn't like Wu Saiping's Jianghu habits, but the loyalty of Wu Saiping's subordinates was much stronger than theirs. "I'll leave this matter to you three. I only want the result." Chu Xiu ordered. Lu Qingli asked in surprise, "Us?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "If it wasn't you, could it be me? If I do everything myself, what's the use of you guys then?" Lu Qingli and the other two looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They knew what this meant. This was their proof of allegiance to Chu Xiu. If they killed the people on Wu Saiping's side, they would also have something that could be used against them by Chu Xiu. They could not find a reason to betray him, nor did they want to. Therefore, the three of them could only cup their hands and leave with Wu Saiping's corpse. The Jianghu City Patrol Hall had jurisdiction over more than 10 small cities around it. They were not too far away. The furthest place could be reached in 2 or 3 days on horseback. Moreover, this time, they had decided to submit to Chu Xiu, so they had to show their sincerity. Therefore, they gathered all the Jianghu constables under them and gathered them in a rundown temple outside the city under Wu Saiping's name. They said that there was a mission for them. At this time, in the rundown temple outside Jianghu City, more than 50 Jianghu constables were gathered. They all looked puzzled. Since the death of the previous patrol Fang Jingyuan, they hadn't made such a big move in a long time. Could it be that the new patrol was up to something? One of the warriors asked a bald warrior beside him, "Brother Sun, what is Lord Wu planning to do by gathering us here? Is something big going to happen? You are always by Lord Wu's side. You should know the news." The bald warrior touched his bald head and said doubtfully, "I don't know either." After the new patrol called Lord Wu and the others to the meeting hall, he acted mysteriously and gathered everyone together. "I don't know what he's up to. However, you don't have to worry. The new patrol is only in the physical invulnerability realm. He got in because of his connections. What right does he have to be above Lord Wu? In the future, the patrol hall will still respect Lord Wu. While everyone was discussing, Du Guangzhong and the other two walked into the rundown temple. Du Guangzhong's personality was a little awkward to do such things, so he let Lu Qingli do it. Lu Qingli had been in the Guangzhong torture room for more than 20 years. His seniority was second only to Du Guangzhong. However, unlike Du Guangzhong, who was more old-fashioned and rigid, Lu Qingli was short and fat. He always had a smiling expression on his face and looked harmless. He usually spoke in a friendly manner, so the ordinary constables and bailiffs didn't really fear him. Seeing Lu Qingli, the bald warrior under Wu Siping asked curiously, "Lord Lu, where is Lord Wu?" Lu Qingli smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'll send you to see Lord Wu." The people under Wu Siping didn't react, but the bald warrior felt that something was wrong. What did he mean by sending them to see Lord Wu? However, before he could object, Lu Qingli waved his hand with a smile on his face and said softly, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of bowstrings exploding could be heard from outside the dilapidated temple. Dozens of huge crossbow bolts as thick as an arm were shot at the same time, directly penetrating the wall and immediately killing half of the warriors under Wu Siping. After a round of crossbow bolts, more than 30 Jianghu constables, the weakest of whom was in the Xiantian stage, rushed into the rundown temple and started a massacre with Lu Qingli and the other two. After all, Wu Siping had more than 50 people under him. Although Lu Qingli and the others were physical invulnerability experts, they couldn't kill them all in a short time. It would be troublesome if even one of them escaped. Therefore, they also brought their trusted subordinates to attack. Although there weren't many of them, they were all powerful and reliable confidants. Moreover, Lu Qingli had slyly ordered the others to use the siege-breaking crossbow to ambush and kill half of the enemy. This kind of siege-breaking crossbow was used by armies to attack cities. There were many of them in the Guangzhong Disciplinary Hall, but they were used to apprehend martial artists who cultivated their bodies. Ordinary Xiantian martial artists would have to expend a great deal of effort to defend against them. Those below the Xiantian realm would have no choice but to dodge. In the midst of the massacre, the warriors under Wu Siping were still in a state of confusion. They couldn't understand why their comrades would suddenly kill them. Where was their lord? Unfortunately, under such a crushing situation, they didn't even have time to think. In less than 15 minutes, they were all slaughtered. Shaking off the blood on his saber, Lu Qingli put his palms together and bowed to the corpses on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Everyone, I'm not the one who wants you dead. Even if you become evil spirits, don't look for me in the middle of the night. That official Chu has a murderous aura around him. I reckon he has killed a lot of people. You guys go look for him." Qin Fong couldn't stand Lu Qingli's attitude. He couldn't help but frown and said, "Old Lu, what's the use of acting like this? If you want to kill people, then kill them. If you're really afraid that they'll become evil spirits and come looking for you, why don't you go and do good deeds?" Lu Qingli glanced at him and said, "What do you know? This is a method I learned from the Bodhi Zen monastery's Zen preaching. Do you know what karma is? Do you know what inner demons are?" Qin Fong curled his lips in disdain and said, "T. Those monks have killed a lot of people themselves. What's the use of these fake things? Don't waste time. Burn the corpses and deal with them." They were all experienced constables in Jianghu. What they were best at was investigating all kinds of traces of fighting. This time, they could fake the scene, but it would be too much effort. Anyway, with Lord Chu Xiu taking the blame, they could just push all the blame onto some villains and thieves. They could just say that these warriors died in the line of duty and were cremated and buried. When the higher-ups investigated, there wouldn't be any evidence at all. It was very simple. After dealing with these corpses, the three of them directly brought their men back to the Jian Province's Inspector Hall. They gathered everyone together and formally paid their respects to Lord Chu Xiu. In fact, this step should have been done when Chu Xiu took office. According to the rules, the four of them should have brought all their men to pay their respects to Chu Xiu. Otherwise, as an inspector, wouldn't it be a joke if he didn't know his men? But at that time, Wu Siping had already decided to make Chu Xiu a mere figurehead, so this scene was naturally avoided. Now, it should be regarded as the first step for Chu Xiu to establish his own prestige in the Jian province's Inspector Hall. At this time, in the martial arts field in the backyard of the Inspector Hall, nearly 200 constables and constables of the Jian province's Inspector Hall gathered here, waiting for Chu Xiu's instructions. As long as one wasn't too stupid, he should be clear about the atmosphere in the Inspector Hall. The new inspector took office, but they weren't allowed to pay their respects. The attitude of the several lords was already obvious. And how long had it been? In less than half a month, they were called by their lords to pay their respects to the new inspector. This attitude naturally explained everything. The new lord's methods were very sharp. It only took him such a long time to make Wu Siping and the others completely submit. However, they were still a little puzzled. Why didn't Wu Si and the others' men come? Only the warriors who participated in the battle against Wu Siping's men remained silent and kept a low profile. After a while, Du Guangzhong and the other two followed behind Chu Xiu to the martial arts field. They stood in front of everyone and bowed to Chu Xiu. "Greetings, Lord." The rest of the Inspector Hall's constables also bowed to Chu Xiu in unison. "Greetings, Lord." Looking at everyone present, Chu Xiu nodded and said, "There are 5 inspectors under the Guanxi region. Ever since the previous inspector, Lord Fong, died in the line of duty, the Jian province's Inspector Hall has become the weakest among all the inspectors. However, life and death are decreed by fate. The strength of the Jian province's Inspector Hall doesn't depend on me, but on you. In the past, you didn't have a chance to fight, but now, I'm giving you this chance." Chapter 157. Chu Xiu's provocative words did not resonate too much with the warriors present. Other than Du Guangzhong and a few of his trusted subordinates who were more active, the rest of the warriors were not too excited. Those who were able to work in the Guangzhong torture room were people who had seen the world. They would not be easily incited. In other words, these people were also very realistic. Those who were capable would study and climb up, while those who were incapable could only see the benefits in front of them. Right now, Chu Xiu had just taken office, and they had not seen any benefits at all. It was obviously impossible for them to serve him with just these words. Of course, Chu Xiu did not care. He only continued, "There is one more thing to report to everyone. When Constable Wu Siping and his subordinates were hunting down the old demon of the Yin Mountain, Dugafang, who was wanted in the Guanzhong Pass, they were brutally killed by this demon. His subordinates were also slaughtered by this demon and died in the line of duty. I have already had them buried properly. The Guanzhong torture room has also done its best to protect the safety of the Guanzhong Pass over the years. However, your life is your own, so you must be more careful when you carry out missions in the future." As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone present changed. Some of the smarter ones seemed to have already figured out what was going on. The old demon of the Yin Mountain, Dugfang, was an expert who had stepped into the realm of 3 flower at one's prominence. He was indeed capable of slaughtering Wu Siping and the others. However, the problem was that Wu Siping did not seem like the kind of person who would risk his life to capture such a demon. Moreover, they did not seem to have heard of Wu Siping taking people out during this period of time. When he thought about it in this way, the reason behind it was obvious. Everyone's hearts turned cold at the same time. Putting aside the ability of this new lord, his actions were ruthless enough. Alright, this matter ends here. Everyone, disperse and continue patrolling. Constables Du Guangzhong, Lu Qingli, and Qin Fang will be in charge of Wu Siping's territory. Hearing this, the bailiffs and constables replied loudly, "Yes, sir." This time, their aura was much stronger than before. Since Wu Siping's subordinates had so many empty places, they naturally had to continue to manage them. In this way, the authority in their hands would also be greater than before. Only when they saw the benefits would they be motivated, right? After everyone left, Chu Xiu called Du Guangzhong and the other two to the study room. After the 3 of them were seated, Chu Xiu asked, "The morale of the constables and constables at Jian Province's patrol hall doesn't seem to be very high." Lu Qingli smiled bitterly. Sir, our Guanxi region has a total of 6 inspectors, but our Jianzhou Inspector Hall is the weakest. Our income is also the lowest. Of course, our subordinates have no morale. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is it because of the previous inspector?" Lu Qingli nodded. More or less. There are 2 main reasons. Firstly, Jian Province's area isn't that big. The other stronger inspectors are even in charge of 2 prefectures at the same time. Furthermore, the previous patrol inspector, Lord Fong, was a little too upright and plain-spoken. His subordinates only received a little salary, but they didn't receive any other benefits. Yet, he always sent his subordinates out to carry out missions to capture those villains that weren't to be trifled with. Although this is the duty of the Guanzhong torture room, we have to at least act according to our capabilities, don't we? Every time we take action, we suffer heavy losses. In the end, even if we manage to capture someone, the rewards given by the higher-ups are pitifully small. Sir Fong isn't greedy. He gives all the rewards to the brothers under him, but that little bit of money isn't even enough to fill the gaps between a few hundred people. Lu Qingli's tone was filled with resentment. Obstructing one's path to wealth was akin to killing one's parents. Although the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was their superior, they still hated him to the core. Looking at the people from the other inspector's hall eating the meat, while they didn't even get to drink the soup, of course they weren't happy. Chu Xiu agreed with Lu Qingli's words. People's hearts were different. If you wanted to be a saint, but you didn't consider the benefits of your subordinates and wanted them to be saints, you naturally wouldn't be popular. In the past, when Chu Kuanga commanded the Guanzhong torture room, he relied on his personal charisma. He took the lead in everything, and the others were willing to follow him. Meanwhile, Guan Xiu commanded the Guanzhong torture room because of his power. Even though Guan Xiu was impartial and merciless, and even gave the warriors in the Guanzhong torture room very little salary, he was the one who turned the Guanzhong torture room, which could only survive in the cracks, into a military organization that was recognized by the 3 countries. Moreover, Guan Xiu wasn't greedy for power. The 4 disciplinary officers, numerous inspectors, and the disciplinary bureau's secret agents all possessed extremely shocking power. So, they were naturally willing to pledge loyalty to Guan Xiu. As for Chu Xiu, the former Fang Jingyuan, his personal charisma was naturally not as good as Chu Kuanga's, and his ability was not as good as Guan Xiu's. However, he wanted to learn from these 2 outstanding people. Even though he had no qualms about it, his subordinates still complained. At this time, Qin Fang suddenly said, "Now there is another reason why the morale of our Jianzhou Inspector Hall is low. That is, in the small cities around the Jianzhou Prefecture, there is not much power left in our Inspector Hall. The local martial arts forces don't take us seriously. The one who caused this was that Lord Fong. He was the one who wanted to die, and now he's played himself to death." Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "Old Qin, don't talk nonsense. It was the sentencing officer who personally sent people to investigate how Lord Fong died. The matter has been settled. It was just an accident." At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly became interested. He directly said to Qin Fang, "Tell me. It doesn't matter. We are all on the same side. Is there any secret about the death of the previous inspector Fang Jingyuan?" Logically speaking, the Guanzhong torture room was the ruler of the entire Guanzhong area. Although the Guanzhong area was a mix of good people and bad people, no matter how arrogant you were, you would still be under the jurisdiction of the Guanzhong torture room. However, now Qin Fang said that the Jianzhou Inspector Hall had no power in the entire Jianzhou Prefecture. This was very strange. Moreover, there was nothing suspicious about the death of the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan. He was killed by Han Rang, the blood emptiness sword, while he was hunting down a 3-flower realm criminal at one's prominence. Of course, this was certainly not like how Chu Xiu killed Wu Saiping. He only secretly gave Fang Jingyuan a reasonable death. Fang Jingyuan attacked in a small city and was killed in front of hundreds of warriors. There was nothing suspicious about it. However, now that Qin Fang said it, could there be an inside story? Qin Fang coughed and said, "Official Chu, since I've already pledged my allegiance to you, there's no point in hiding these things from you. The previous patrol inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was indeed killed in front of everyone. To an outsider, there was nothing strange about it. However, we have followed Fang Jingyuan for many years, and we have a good understanding of his strength. Master Fang's strength can definitely be ranked at the top among the warriors in the realm of three flower at one's prominence. As for Han Rang, to put it bluntly, he was just a coward. Usually, he only dared to rob and kill some small merchants in Guangzhou. He didn't even dare to touch the bigger ones. The reason why he was able to become famous was because of the fifth transformation precious weapon, the Blood Emptiness Sword, in his hand. It has the effect of transforming blood qi. If there was enough blood qi, the Blood Emptiness Sword could even be upgraded to a sixth transformation precious weapon. We saw that battle with our own eyes. In the beginning, Master Fang was able to suppress his opponent with just a few moves. However, later on, Master Fang's strength suddenly fell to the extreme, not even reaching the innate realm. In the end, he was killed by Han Rang with a sword. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, "If that's the case, it's not really suspicious. There are all kinds of strange things in Jianghu. Maybe Han Rang used some kind of method to sneak attack Fang Jingyuan and kill him." Qin Fang shook his head and said, "There have been many suspicious points in this matter from the beginning. Han Rang is as timid as a mouse. Before Lord Fang chased after him, he just happened to rob and kill a group of merchants outside a small city in the Jianghu prefecture. According to his character, after committing a crime, he would immediately flee far away, but this time he took the initiative to show himself in front of us. Moreover, when Han Rang showed up, we happened to be at the Jiang family's banquet. After we parted on bad terms, Han Rang seemed to have received the news in advance and deliberately appeared in front of us, attracting Master Fang to attack him. In the end, he was killed. This is the suspicious point." Qin Fang frowned and asked, "Wait, who is this Jiang family? Why is it related to Fang Jingyuan?" Chu Xiu asked with a frown. Qin Fang said, "The Jiang family is one of the major powers in the Jianghu prefecture. They have a long history, almost as long as the time when the Guangzhou torture room was established. Master Fang also knows that the Guangzhou area is the center of trade between the three countries. There are countless caravans coming and going, but there are some prohibited items that are clearly prohibited from being traded to prevent them from entering the other country. However, although there are clear prohibitions in the torture room, there are still some people who refuse to mend their ways. Among them, the most serious are some of the local martial arts powers in the Guangzhou area. For example, they buy some prohibited items from Northern Yen and sell them to Eastern Qi or Western Chu. Simply put, it's smuggling. Once this kind of behavior is discovered by the Guangzhou torture room, it will definitely be investigated. At that time, Master Fang suspected that the Jiang family was secretly smuggling these prohibited items, so he questioned the Jiang family. However, the Jiang family refused to admit it, so we didn't find anything. When Master Fang came to the Jiang family for the second time, the Jiang family prepared to bribe Master Fang. However, Master Fang refused and fell out with the Jiang family, saying that he would bring Master Fang back to the torture room to be interrogated and so on. They parted on bad terms on the spot. Official Chu, you also know what happened after that. Master Fang was killed, and the investigation of the Jiang family's smuggling was also left unsettled. Because of this, the Jianghu Patrol Hall's prestige in the Jianghu Prefecture's martial arts world was greatly reduced, causing people to think that the Jianghu Patrol Hall's work is all bark and no bite. Chapter 158. Qin Fang told him what had happened. Chu Xiu immediately felt that something was wrong because everything was too coincidental. Fang Jingyuan had just said that he wanted to investigate the Jiang family, but he was killed in the blink of an eye. Chu Xiu would never believe that there was nothing fishy about this. Since Chu Xiu could easily see through it, the other martial arts forces in the Jianghu prefecture should also be able to see through it. That was why they felt that the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall was just SOSO. It was all bark and no bite. Not only could they not find anything, but a dignified inspector had lost his life here. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Since there are so many suspicious points, why didn't the higher-ups send someone to investigate?" Qin Fong smiled bitterly and said, "Of course they sent someone to investigate, but it was not Lord Wei Juduan personally. It was just a Jianghu constable sent by the Guanxi Torture Hall branch to investigate. They didn't investigate the Jiang family, but only Lord Feng's injuries. They didn't find anything unusual. In fact, although we found something wrong, we didn't find anything unusual." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "The Jiang family is such a big suspect, but they didn't investigate them. What's going on? Are the Jianghu constables sent by the higher-ups inferior to you?" Qin Fong coughed and said, "During the penal officer's birthday, the Jiang family once presented a jade Buddha statue. It was made of the heart-clearing warm jade, a specialty of the Chu land. It was extremely precious and could help a martial artist to quickly calm down during seclusion. The penal officer liked it very much, so he specially ordered us not to investigate the Jiang family before we have absolute evidence, lest we make a big fuss." A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. This was blatant bribery. He seemed to have some understanding of his immediate superior's character. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Has the penal officer's character always been like this?" At this moment, Du Guangzhong sighed and said, "Of course not. In the past, when Lord Chu Kuanga was around, the disciplinary officer wouldn't do this. Later, when Lord Guanxiu became the hall master, orders were strictly enforced. The disciplinary officer didn't dare to do this. It was just that in recent years, the disciplinary officer was getting on in years and was about to retire, so he had to find a way out for himself. That was why he had amassed so much wealth. When Lord Feng Jingyuan was the patrol inspector, he was a little too stiff. Not only did he not give any benefits to the disciplinary officer, he even gave some worthless calligraphy and paintings to the disciplinary officer for his birthday. He had long lost the disciplinary officer's favor. Wei Hanshan, the inspector of the Shang prefecture, which is right next to the Jian prefecture, is now in charge of not only the Shang prefecture but also the Chen prefecture because he knows how to please the disciplinary officer. He is equivalent to the inspector of these two places. Furthermore, this time, it was you who was sent by the higher-ups to be the Jian prefecture's patrol envoy. If you hadn't come, I heard that Wei Hanshan would still be collecting treasures and preparing to persuade the disciplinary officer to let him manage the Jian prefecture's affairs as well." Chu Xiu thought about it. He seemed to have some impression of Wei Hanshan. He was very arrogant and obviously did not put him, the new patrol inspector, in his eyes. His attitude was not good. However, from the looks of it, it was probably because Chu Xiu was in his way. The disciplinary officer has gone overboard. Isn't the main hall going to do something about it? Du Guangzhong gritted his teeth and said, "Official Chu, these words are actually a little taboo, but it doesn't matter now. In the early years, when Lord Guanxiu had just taken control of the Guangzhong torture room, the entire Guangzhong torture room was absolutely strict. No one dared to make a mistake. In recent years, although the Guangzhong torture room has become more and more powerful, Lord Guanxiu has been a little slack. His superiors follow suit. Even the main hall is like this, not to mention the subordinates. All of this is because of that woman. Ever since Lord Guanxiu married that woman, his actions have become more and more incomprehensible. Femme fatale, Lord Guan is no longer the Lord Guan of the past." Du Guangzhong's tone carried some resentment. He was a veteran of the Guangzhong torture room. He had experienced the era of Chu Kuanga and the early days of the Guangzhong torture room's rise. He missed that period of time very much. But now, the Guangzhong torture room had changed. It had changed so much that he didn't even recognize it. He himself had also changed. Even he, who didn't dare to be greedy, had conspired with Wu Siping to withhold the tax revenue under the bewitchment of Wu Siping. Lu Qingli, who was at the side, shouted in a low voice, "Old Du! Are you crazy? You dare to say anything. If you say this outside, you won't be the only one in trouble. You'll even implicate us." Du Guangzhong said lightly, "I've wanted to say this for a long time, but I'm not an idiot. Of course, I won't say this outside. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about it. We're all on the same side now. Of course, I won't say it outside." As he said this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but think of Guan Xiyu's wife, Mei Qinglian, that extremely seductive woman. However, Chu Xiu had seen Guan Xiyu before. She was decisive and had a clear mind. Just from the way she talked and behaved, this chief of the Guanzhong torture room wasn't an idiot who would be bewitched by a woman. Chu Xiu wasn't interested in the secrets of important figures for the time being. He only said to Du Guangzhong and the other two, "Come with me to the Jiang family tomorrow." Du Guangzhong said in surprise, "Official Chu wants to investigate the death of De Guangzhong?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "I have nothing to do with Fang Jingyuan. Why would I investigate that? Moreover, this matter has already been decided by the disciplinary officer. Even if I find evidence and go to the disciplinary officer to reverse the verdict, it will only be a slap to the disciplinary officer's face. However, the one who started the trouble had to be the one who started it. Since the Jianzhou patrol hall suffered a loss at the hands of the Jiang family, we naturally have to get it back from the Jiang family. Moreover, our patrol hall also needs some new sources of income. Not to mention the danger of being blackmailed by others, we won't be able to get much money. It's not worth it." Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at each other and didn't say anything. Now that they had expressed their allegiance to Chu Xiu, they would naturally do whatever Chu Xiu said. Of course, that was unless they were going to die. If Chu Xiu really wanted them to die, they naturally wouldn't foolishly charge forward. The next morning, Chu Xiu brought Du Guangzhong and the other two, as well as some accompanying constables, to the Jiang family. The Jiang family was located in a small city called Qi City. This small city used to be a large villa owned by the Qi family. Later on, the Qi family was destroyed, and the small villa was occupied by many outsiders. In the end, it developed into a small city. The Jiang family's strength was considered to be at the top of the Jianzhou prefecture. The great ancestor of the Jiang family had the strength of the three-flower realm at one's prominence. However, because he was old, he no longer cared about the family's affairs. He spent all his time cultivating in the inner house. The position of the family leader had already been handed over, and the family's affairs had also been handed over to the next generation. After arriving in Qi City, Lu Qingli introduced, "Sir, the Jiang family has a strong foundation in the Jianzhou prefecture, especially in this Qi City. The Jiang family has been in business for several generations. It's even called Jiang Banqing, which means that half of the business in Qi City belongs to the Jiang family." Chu Xiu asked, "Is there anyone in the inspector's office in Qi City?" Lu Qingli was a little embarrassed as he said, "There is, but there's only an innate stage constable and a few ordinary constables. Usually, they're only in charge of petty theft and the like. Their words are basically useless when it comes to important matters." The Jianghu constable in charge of Qi City happened to be Lu Qingli's subordinate, which was why he seemed a little embarrassed. Chu Xiu didn't mind and said, "Go to the Jiang family." At this time, in the Jiang family leader, Jiang Shichen, was sitting in the main seat, listening to the servant's report with a puzzled look in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't expect the new inspector to come to the Jiang family at this time. The expression of an old man below him changed a little as he said, "Master, is this new inspector here to investigate the matter of the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan? Back then, I advised you that the Jiang family was so careful and didn't leave any evidence behind. If Fang Jingyuan wants to investigate, just let him. Moreover, we've been filial to the disciplinary officer. When the time comes, just let the disciplinary officer put pressure on him. But you didn't listen and insisted on plotting against Fang Jingyuan. You colluded with the blood-emptiness sword, Han Rang, to kill Fang Jingyuan. Great, now you've left something that can be used against you. Killing an inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. If this is discovered, it'll be a crime punishable by the annihilation of the entire family." Jiang Shichen looked at the elder in disgust. Everything about the Jiang family was good, except for these old things who were always greedy for power and talked nonsense here. These elders were of the same generation as the Jiang family's great ancestor. In the end, the great ancestor had gone into closed-door cultivation and didn't care about the family's affairs, but these old fellows were still a hindrance here. Before Jiang Shichen could say anything, a Jiang family martial artist in his 40s stood up and snorted coldly. Let's investigate then. The Guanxi Torture Hall branch has already concluded that it was just an accident. Han Rang has also completely left Guanzhong, and even Fang Jingyuan's corpse has been cremated. What can this new inspector find out? Moreover, during Lord Wei's birthday celebration, our Jiang family took out 1/5 of our family's assets to create that heart-warming jade Buddha statue. It won't be so easy for this new inspector to touch our Jiang family. On the other hand, if the few of you panic and lose your composure, you'll be causing trouble for our Jiang family. This person was Jiang Shichen's younger half-brother, Jiang Yao. He had been on Jiang Shichen's side since he was young. Now that he saw these elders' fearful expressions, he couldn't help but feel angry. The elder shouted sternly, "You brat! How dare you speak to I like this? Do you still have any respect for the rules? Do you have any respect for your seniors?" Jiang Shichen waved his hand and said, "All right, stop arguing. Why are you arguing when you haven't even seen the person? Go invite the new inspector in. Our Jiang family has been in Jianghu for nearly 300 years. What's there to be afraid of here with our foundation? At most, we'll just deal with whatever comes our way." Chapter 159. The Jiang family welcomed Chu Xiu politely into the main hall. Jiang Shichen cupped his hands at Lu Qingli, who was the first to enter. "Lord Lu, you haven't been here for some time. May I know what brings you here this time?" In the Jianzhou prefecture, the Jiang family was most familiar with Lu Qingli. Qi City was under Lu Qingli's jurisdiction. Lu Qingli pointed at Chu Xiu behind him and said, "This is the new inspector of the Jianzhou prefecture, Chu Xiu, official Chu." Jiang Shichen and the rest of the Jiang family were about to greet Chu Xiu, but they were stunned when they saw Chu Xiu's strength. Clearly, they didn't expect the new inspector to only be in the physical invulnerability realm. However, Jiang Shichen didn't look too surprised. He only chuckled and said, "So it's official Chu. What a shame." Official Chu was too low-key when he took office. Otherwise, the Jiang family would have sent a congratulatory gift personally. Jiang Shichen was just being polite. No matter how low-key Chu Xiu was, the Jianzhou prefecture was only so big. How could the Jiang family not know about the new inspector? However, they didn't plan to do so. Chu Xiu waved his hand indifferently and said, "You're too polite, Lord Jiang. The Guanzhong torture room guards are just formalities. It doesn't matter if I have it or not." Jiang Shichen chuckled and said, "Official Chu can be indifferent, but the Jiang family can't be indifferent. I'll prepare food and drinks immediately. Official Chu, please take a seat." Seeing that Chu Xiu's attitude was still considered amiable, everyone from the Jiang family heaved a sigh of relief. They were afraid that the new inspector would be like the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, stubborn and unmoved. That would be a headache for them. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There's no hurry to eat. Actually, I'm here to ask the Jiang family for help." As soon as he said that, the atmosphere immediately became a little tense. The other members of the Jiang family were afraid that Chu Xiu would ask them to help investigate the accidental death of the previous inspector. Jiang Shichen's expression was calm as he said, "Official Chu, if you have something to say, just say it. As long as my Jiang family can help, my Jiang family will definitely not decline." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Well said. Actually, I'm here to beg for alms from you, Patriarch Jiang. Master Jiang, you should be aware of the situation in the Great Wall. Warriors and caravans from the northern Yan, eastern Qi, and western Chu, as well as some miscellaneous people have gathered here. This has caused the entire Great Wall to be a mess of dragons and snakes, and has attracted many evil cultivators who want to take advantage of the chaos. It's not easy for the Guanzhong torture room to protect the safety of this area. There have been many sacrifices over the years, such as the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, and the Jianghu constable Wu Saiping, who was under my command not long ago. These people all died in the line of duty to protect the Great Wall. The other members of the Jiang family were slightly nervous when they heard the name Fang Jingyuan, but Jiang Shichen's expression did not change. This was because he knew that the new inspector in front of him did not come for Fang Jingyuan. Otherwise, he would not have added Wu Saiping to the list. Everyone in the outside world knew very well what happened to Wu Saiping. This arrogant Jianghu constable used to do things very carefully and would never easily take risks. In the end, the new inspector had just arrived and Wu Saiping died in the line of duty. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? However, the case of Wu Saiping was the same as the case of Fang Jingyuan. There was no evidence and only suspicion was useless. If the people did not report, the officials would not investigate. In any case, as long as no one investigated, it was absolutely safe. Therefore, Jiang Shichen's attention was focused on the word asking for alms that Chu Xiu mentioned. He couldn't help but ask, "What does official Chu mean?" Chu Xiu said plainly, "It's very simple. The Guanzhong torture room protects the safety of this area, but the brothers under me are unwilling to exchange their weapons even if they are broken. I heard that the Jiang family is wealthy and even has the title of Jiang Banqing in Qi City. Therefore, I am thick-skinned and would like to ask for some help from Master Jiang." When the Jiang family heard Chu Xiu say this, they immediately let out a sigh of relief. So it turned out that he was here to ask for money. Since that was the case, it was much easier to deal with. In other places, if the local martial arts forces were asked for money by the people of the imperial court, they would naturally be very disgusted and would resist. However, in Guanzhong, 99% of the aristocratic families established themselves in Guanzhong by trading with the people of the other 3 countries. The Guanzhong torture room controlled their lifeline, so it was very necessary to have a good relationship with the Guanzhong torture room. Not to mention asking for money, the heartwarming jade Buddha that the Jiang family gave to Wei Juduan cost 1/5 of the Jiang family's entire fortune. It was a huge loss. Why did the previous patrol Fang Jingyuan die? It wasn't because he was greedy, but because he wasn't greedy. Now that Chu Xiu took the initiative to ask for something from them, it was a good thing. Therefore, Jiang Shichen immediately found a servant and whispered a few words in his ear. He turned his head and said to Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, don't worry. The Jiang family has been in Guanzhong for so many years and has been protected by the Guanzhong torture room for so many years. It's time for us to make some contributions to the Guanzhong torture room." After a while, a servant came over with a brocade box. Jiang Shichen placed the brocade box in front of Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Official Chu, please accept it." Chu Xiu opened the brocade box. There was a row of finger-sized purple gold bars and 2 bottles of elixirs. Jiang Shichen stretched out his hand and said, 200 taels of purple gold, 2 bottles of 5th Revolution elixir raising elixir, 20 elixirs. It's just a small token, please accept it. Chu Xiu looked at the things in the brocade box, picked up a purple gold bar and played with it. He looked at Jiang Shichen and said, "It's really a small token. Patriarch Jiang, do you think that I, Chu Xiu, am a beggar?" Bang! Chu Xiu slapped the brocade box to one side. This sudden outburst shocked everyone. Even Du Guangzhong and the others did not expect that Chu Xiu would fall out with the Jiang family on the spot. The people of the Jiang family showed a trace of anger on their faces. Chu Xiu's action was like a slap to their faces. Jiang Yao, who was hot-tempered, was about to lose his temper but was stopped by Jiang Shichen. The smile on Jiang Shichen's face disappeared. He looked at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Official Chu, what do you mean by this?" Chu Xiu said coldly, "What do I mean? 200 purple gold bars and 2 bottles of 5th Revolution elixirs are enough to send off a physical invulnerability warrior. But can you send off more than 200 constables and bailiffs of the Jian Province Inspector Hall?" Jiang Shichen suppressed the anger in his eyes and said, "Then, Official Chu, how much do you want?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Not much. Just 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets." Hearing this, Jiang Shichen was so angry that he laughed and said, "Official Chu, what a big appetite you have. Other people are greedy, but you are more ruthless than an evil dragon. You want 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets just by opening your mouth. What right do you have to say that? Chu Xiu said indifferently, your Jiang family is rich and overbearing. You can even give 1/5 of the Jiang family's assets to the disciplinary officer as a birthday gift. Now, am I not worth 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets? Everyone in the Jiang family could see that Chu Xiu was simply making trouble out of nothing. The Jiang family took out 1/5 of the Jiang family's assets to give Wei Juduan a birthday gift because they were bold enough to be ruthless enough to get protection. In reality, this was indeed the case. Although the Jiang family was considered a powerful force in the Jianzhou prefecture, it was very inconspicuous in the entire Guangxi area. However, when Jiang Shichen stood his ground and took out 1/5 of the family's assets to buy a heartwarming jade Buddha statue for Wei Juduan, the Jiang family immediately stood out and became the most outstanding person at the birthday banquet. Wei Juduan was also very satisfied with the Jiang family's gift. When the others saw Wei Juduan's attitude, they knew that Wei Juduan remembered the Jiang family's favor. Therefore, they would not provoke the Jiang family for no reason. This also allowed the Jiang family to have a smooth life in the past few years. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, Fang Jingyuan did not care about Wei Juduan's attitude and insisted on making things difficult for them. It was also impossible for the Jiang family to transfer Fang Jingyuan elsewhere. Although Wei Juduan remembered the Jiang family's favor, it did not mean that Wei Juduan would do whatever the Jiang family said. This was because it was only a favor and not a transaction. Wei Juduan would only give it if he wanted to. If Wei Juduan did not want to give it, they could not ask for it. If the Jiang family sent someone to Wei Juduan directly and asked him to transfer Fang Jingyuan away, Wei Juduan would definitely kick the Jiang family out and think that the Jiang family did not know how to appreciate favors. Since when did a small family dare to interfere with the appointment of a patroller? They were simply asking for death. Therefore, the Jiang family chose to take the risk and get rid of Fang Jingyuan. As long as they did it discreetly and did not leave any obvious evidence, when the matter was reported to Wei Juduan would stop people from investigating the Jiang family. Otherwise, if a patroller died, according to tradition, there would be a strict investigation. After this series of events, they had already earned back the money they spent on Wei Juduan's birthday gift. This transaction was rather worth it. Looking at Chu Xiu, although he was a patroller, he was just a newcomer. Most importantly, he was only in the physical invulnerability realm. What kind of benefits could a physical invulnerability patroller bring to them? This was something the Jiang family could not think of. Therefore, when Chu Xiu asked for 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets, it could only be described as wishful thinking. At this moment, even the Jiang family elders who had been hesitant were about to turn hostile. However, at this moment, Jiang Shichen suddenly waved his hand and stopped them from saying anything. Looking at Chu Xiu, Jiang Shichen smiled and said, "Official Chu, the thing you want is too precious. I have to report it to the patriarch before I can make a decision. Moreover, 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets are not only in Qi City, but also in the outside world. I need time to gather them. I wonder if official Chu can extend the deadline by 3 days. After 3 days, the Jiang family will definitely give you an answer, official Chu. Chu Xiu looked deeply at Jiang Shichen and said, "All right, I will give you 3 days. I hope that after 3 days, you will make a rational decision." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.